physiological characteristics of some gray reptilian species. Autopsied by United States government, alien life form, term used by the government to describe the Greys in terms of being a malevolent life form. The deal with the Greys is that their field around their body is different to ours to the point where merging of the fields ends up creating physical symptoms, the body terror mentioned by people like Whitley Strieber. The field around them is in direct opposition to ours. It is an anti-life field, as these specific species are on a devolutionary spiral. They are akin to soldiers of fortune, and offer their advanced technology and trade for things they require. They are experts at manipulation of both the human body through manipulation of the fields and the human mind. They require blood and other biological fluids to survive. They abduct humans and animals in order to acquire these fluids. They implant small devices near the brain which potentially gives them total control and monitoring capability. These devices are very difficult to detect. The analysis of the devices by technical staff has produced a description that involves use of crystalline technology combined with molecular circuitry, and these ride on the resonant emissions of the brain and the various fields of the human. Information is untrained on the brain waves. It appears that all attempts to remove the implants 1972 have resulted in the death of the human. This is usually due in part to the fact that the implants are attached to major nerve centers, and once attached the nerve tissues grow in and around the implant, essentially making the implant a part of the nervous system. When relatively unsophisticated medical procedures are used in an attempt to remove the implants, major nerve centers are damaged as a result, causing severe injury or even death. Branton, various descriptions of the elves relate the following characteristics: between 3 to 3.5 feet in height, erect standing biped, small thin build, head larger than humans, absence of auditory lobes external, absence of body hair, large tear-shaped eyes slanted approximately 35 degrees, which are opaque black with vertical slit pupils, arms resembling praying mantis, normal attitude which reach to the knees, long hands with small palm, claw-like fingers, various number of digits, often 2 short digits and 2 long, but some species have 3 or 4 fingers, tough gray skin which is reptilian in texture, small feet with 4 small claw-like toes, organs that are similar to human organs but have obviously developed according to a different mutational process. A non-functioning digestive system. 2 separate brains. Movement is deliberate, slow and precise. Alien subsistence requires that they must have human blood and other biological substances to survive. Other indications suggest that originally they did not require human blood, but once having used human blood for this purpose they have since acquired a racial addiction to this vital substance. This goes far beyond just mere physical hunger, since the Greys/reptiloids tend to feed off the human life energies resident within human blood plasma, in what may be considered a vampirial type of hunger for human vital fluids. Branton. In extreme circumstances they can subsist on other cattle animal fluids. Food is converted to energy by chlorophyll by a photosynthetic process. This supports results gained from autopsies at 29 Palms underground base, where it was seen that their blood was greenish and the tissue was black. Waste products are secreted through the skin. The 2 separate brains are separated by mid-cranial lateral bone, anterior and posterior brain. There is no apparent connection between the 2. Some autopsies have revealed a crystalline network which is thought to have a function in telepathic and other functions which help to maintain the group consciousness between members of the same species. Functions of group consciousness in this species does have a disadvantage in that decisions in this species come rather slowly as the matter at hand filters through the group awareness to those who must make a decision. The Greys and the Reptilians. From an anonymous abductee. This initial report is concerned with 2 groups of aliens, Greys and Reptilians. There are several different kinds of both Greys and Reptilians, but for now I will simply refer to them as single groups. Both groups live on this planet or beneath its surface and in space. They have been here for a long time. The Greys are also working for Reptilians, relative to the abductee as an individual and to the human race as a whole. They have been used by the Reptilians as the middlemen, doing the work and exposing themselves to us on behalf of and instead of the Reptilians. Although reptilian-based, the Saurian Greys are less visibly so, which is why they have been chosen to interface with abductees. Branton. The Greys are consistently referred to as a mercenary force. Some Reptilians eat humans like we eat chicken. In the United States, there are rumors of great, underground food storage rooms full of preserved human bodies. Sometimes the rumor has it that the bodies are those of children. I asked the Greys why, if this was true, would it be children? I was told that it is not only children but also adults that reptilians eat. Children are preferred because they are generally unpoisoned by substances like caffeine, nicotine, alcohol and other things adults are saturated with, as a group. The reptilians seem to have little regard for us as living beings. They think that we are as ugly and repulsive to them as we ever portrayed them to be, and that we, the human race, are as valuable as weeds. However, they do seem to consider some of us valuable property. One gets the feeling they will continue to use us as they see fit, or, if we ever become a real problem as a group, they would sooner wipe us out than deal with it. They do not fear us, considering themselves far superior to us by all comparisons. They supposedly consider the surface of this planet to be a poisonous, inhospitable environment and allow us to live here as livestock. Branton, since they live below the surface and in space, we and our surface environment function as a physical buffer or a living shield around their home underground. Note, some sources claim that many of the Greys and reptiloids are moving en masse to massive underground centers below major human cities for the sole purpose of having a human shield in order to protect themselves from Earth-penetrating weapons which their Andromedan, Pleiadian or other enemies might otherwise use to destroy them. This would also provide them with a ready source of human biological material for whatever purpose they require. Branton, socially and culturally, Greys and humans are very different. They fear us because they know we are potentially powerful beings. However, they insist that they own us. They say they created us, lie. Branton, and therefore have the right to do what they will with us. Beyond this original right to interfere with us, they say they have additionally earned the right through their control. Because they can control us on an individual and cultural basis both physically and mentally, they say they own us. These attitudes are propaganda. Their control over us in any capacity is ultimately very frail due to its very nature. Depends on us not knowing that we are being controlled, Branton. Their control is based on intimidation and advanced technology. As we become more aware, we are harder to control, harder to lie to, harder to confuse. Our technology would definitely be competitive to theirs if we had access to it. Much of the technology we would need to effectively overcome this situation exists now. Within the alien-manipulated military-industrial establishment which is part of the secret or corporate government technocracy, Branton. It just isn't made available to the public, for economic reasons, as well as national security. The preceding statements about the Greys are based on conversations with them and long observation of them. Impressions about the reptilians are more general. I have not engaged in conversations with the taller reptilians, though they have sometimes spoken to me. Most of my experience with them does not include direct communication between me and them. Almost all of my consciously recalled memories of reptilians also include Greys, who usually do the communicating between us. Often the reptilians seem to be present during abductions as observers only, standing off to the side of the action, just watching. The Greys and the Bavarian Thule Society. The Greys were ultimately behind the Bavarian Gnostic Thule group in Germany during the war, and no doubt were ultimately behind German policy of internment and termination of the Jews during the war. Think of the emotion that was generated in the concentration camps. Note, reptiloids and Greys feed off of negative emotions like fear via a type of osmosis. Joint operational underground bases maintained by the reptiloids/Greys reportedly exist beneath Germany as they do beneath the United States. Branton, the pasturing and use of surface Earth humans. By Jason Bishop 3. Most UFO buffs think that their efforts will lead to some sensible attention by the authorities to the broad problem that UFOs present. The problem of are they invaders? What do they want here on Earth? And all those other nagging questions. They come to Earth for things surface people don't even know about. Earth is on the ancient space trade routes. They come to bases, cavern city complexes, and they mine, manufacture, and do some genetic manipulations to form various subservient crossbreeds. The reptilians, for the most part, we are dealing with another species that is humanoid in shape, but reptilian in heritage. Their leader elite are the Draco. They even have special wings, which are flaps of skin, supported by long ribs. These can be folded back against the body. They are also known as the dragon race, and their symbology usually includes the winged serpent. There are elements of their species which do not have wings, the soldier class of the species and scientists. They are all cold-blooded and have to have a balanced environment to maintain body temperature. The soldier class of the species can bury themselves in the ground and wait long periods of time in order to ambush their enemy. If need be, they can survive on one very large meal every few weeks or even once a year when hibernating or in suspended animation. As a species, they are well suited for space travel due to their ability to hibernate. These reptoids have scales which protect them from moisture loss. They have no sweat glands. The scales, scutes, are much larger on their backs, making the skin waterproof. The scales elsewhere on the body are more flexible. They have 3 fingers with an opposing thumb. The eyes are cat-like and large. They have twin nostrils at the end of a short stubby muzzle. They are mostly meat-eaters. The mouth is more like a slit, lipless, but they have teeth which are differentiated into incisors, canines, and molars. They average from 6 to 7 feet in height. The reptilian, amphibian, humanoids have been interacting with Earth for ages. Many contactees and abductees repeatedly describe an insignia of a flying serpent on a shoulder patch, a badge, a medallion or a helmet. The serpent race lives under the ground. The Greys, the reptilian species, directs the efforts of the worker class, which are about 4 feet tall. These are currently referred to as Greys or Ebs, and are the largest category likely to be encountered by surface humans. These beings, the Greys, operate very efficiently in the dark. Their eyes are more sensitive to ultraviolet light. They have the ability to control their heart rate. The normal heart rate for a Grey is above that of a human. The skin seems to have a metallic content and an unusual cobalt pigmentation. Many have no external sex organs. Some have been bred to have them. Note, most reptiloids that have been encountered have been described as having no exterior sex organs. However, on a few occasions reptiloids have been described as having external sex organs. In nearly every case that I have heard of where these reptiloids were encountered, the abductee was a female human who was forcibly raped by the reptilian within an underground base, or even within their own homes during the abduction encounter. Branton, there are accounts in the legends of Babylon, India, Egypt, South America, Central America and elsewhere that reveal the influence of this other species on our own. One variety of reptilian crossbreed is particularly negative and dangerous. This variety, who work with the Draco, do not eat in the same way humans do. These hive-like beings use synthetically produced substances, mixed with blood. Thus slurry is sometimes mixed with hydrogen peroxide, which kills the foreign bacteria and viruses. They may also be feeding off the life essence energy of the substances. They also seem to feed off nuclear energy, and have manipulated humans into developing sources of nuclear power that emit radiation. Nuclear methods involve use of neutrons to create radiation. Methods that use positrons emit no radiation. The Greys, the short, big heads, are mercenaries. They interface with humans in secret societies and within the military/governmental complex. An interconnected web manipulates the surface Earth cultures. Command progression: Draco winged reptilian -- greater than Draco 9-winged, white, brown, green-skinned, etc. -- greater than Greys -- greater than humans. Collaborators. Underground bases and way stations. The caverns beneath Calvert, Texas are being used for some type of operations. Farmers and ranchers in the area have reported hearing peculiar noises coming from deep beneath their feet. Individuals living 5 or 6 miles outside Calvert have been repeatedly driven out of their homes by the sound of generators. In April 1973, students camping in the San Gabriel Mountains on the western edge of the Mojave Desert felt uneasy and then saw a giant man-like creature. Researchers from the UFO Research Institute were called in. They discovered the sound of geared machinery and what might be compared to a hydroelectric plant coming from beneath the forest floor. Sounds of operating machinery have been recorded coming from mines in the area after midnight. The Yakima Indian Reservation, southeast of Tacoma, Washington, is the Yakima Indian Reservation. Of special interest is one particular section 40 miles wide and 70 miles long, bordered on the west by the Cascade Mountain Range. It is an area of canyons and heavily forested regions. The valley is essentially closed to the public and special permits are required to enter. Forestry personnel have heard Dorothy's term unusual sounds for years coming from underground. One area of intense activity is known as Topinish Ridge. From deep within the dark, restricted canyons, glows have been seen. This area is not accessible by foot or vehicle. low-flying silver cigar-shaped craft have been seen to disappear into the deep canyon known as the Middle Fork of Topinash Creek. Chapter 31. Confessions of an FBI X-File Agent. The following is from a secret report released by an FBI special agent codenamed Jordan, who has been involved with the intrigues taking place near Dulce, New Mexico and Area 51, Greenland, Nevada. Among his fellow colleagues within the FBI, Jordan was often referred to as the X-File Man. Jordan claims to be an abductee whose birth in 1962 was genetically engineered by tall grays that had apparently altered the genetic codes within the ovum of his human mother, who was also an abductee, and infused the genetic coding of the ovum with certain specific genetic characteristics taken from another female abductee for some undetermined purpose. Although his life was being severely manipulated by the aliens, agents of the Department of the Navy apparently stepped in to counter some of the machinations which the aliens were carrying out, using abductees like Jordan as pawns in a vast game of cosmic chess. With the permission of the agent himself, the following is reproduced from Mia Adams' book The X-Cells, Assault Publishing, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, 1995. Incidentally, the author uses the British spelling of grey, with an E, rather than the American spelling of grey, with an A, just in case the reader has wondered which is the correct spelling. They are both correct. The account I am about to give is based on my experiences and the personal investigation I have conducted over the past several months. I cannot, and in a few instances I am specifically prevented from, revealing where and when I acquired all of the information I will present. I will state that on 2 occasions I deliberately violated secure areas and on 1 occasion participated in a rather unorthodox field interrogation in order to obtain data. I also deliberately involved several innocent parties who, unfortunately, may become subject to penalties which should rightfully only be mine. I have lied and have done so knowingly and repeatedly in order to elicit information and in order to cause governmental entities to react to moves they only thought I was making. I freely admit that I am guilty of abusing the power of my office and my credentials. I do not apologize for this, but I may soon become subject to the administrative or legal consequences of these actions. So be it. At the risk of appearing melodramatic, more dire consequences may also follow. I can only state that, if resistance is within my power, I will not go quietly. I am taking the precaution of disseminating this account both on paper and on discs to several individuals solely and exclusively as a means of forestalling the desirability of attempting to silence me entirely. It is my belief that revenge would not be the goal of those opposed to my efforts, but, rather, the prevention of the leakage of information. As a copy of this report is now in your hands, I urge you to make numerous additional copies and to place these copies in several locations to avert efforts at recovering all of them. Let me be very clear, if my opponents are able to recover all the copies of my report, then they will inevitably turn to the matter of muzzling me as the only remaining threat to security they face. I am firmly convinced that I was abducted by non-human sentient beings at the age of 6, section deleted, and that my newly surfaced, thanks to Dr. Name deleted, recollections regarding this incident are reliable and real. These beings strongly resembled the gray breeders I will describe below, but, as I remember no workers, I cannot be entirely sure of what these beings represented. However, I have incontrovertible evidence that the aliens who abducted me as a child have maintained an interest, if not an influence in my life. This evidence has already been provided to those who could make best use of it. The Department of the Navy, DON, is a relatively small clandestine agency within the United States government which is staffed primarily by individuals ostensibly recruited and trained by other elements of the federal government. It is funded and supported by the National Security Agency and is also augmented by very tightly compartmentalized elements of the armed forces. I believe that Blue Light is the original code name for the United States Army's Ebb-related unit, which was allegedly converted into the now famous counter-terrorist Delta Force and other governmental organizations. Approximately 1/3 of Headquarters Division 5 of the FBI is actually a front for DON, with at least several dozen HQ special agents devoted to these matters. Despite its name, the Department of the Navy has very little to do with the actual United States Navy. Its existence is known only by an extremely limited number of individuals, and its actual mission is known by an even smaller number. The Department of the Navy's purpose is to direct extraordinary unique activities in relation to extraterrestrial biological entities, EBs, and alien technologies with the primary missions of combating alien operations which are hostile to the national security of the United States, gathering and exploiting alien technologies, and the containment of premature disclosure of information regarding the presence and intentions of the EBs. Ironically, while NASA supposedly suspects or knows that there are alien artifacts on the moon and is suppressing data on this subject, this was only mentioned to me as an aside. NASA has no official role in dealing with EBs. This is not to say, however, that NASA, like the rest of the overt government, is not penetrated by some DON personnel. Furthermore, the DON has had some interaction with NASA personnel who accidentally became aware of too much. I was also told that an overt NASA effort to detect non-human civilizations was doomed to failure, but I was not told why. The Greys are divided into quasi-sentient asexual workers who are, on average, 4 feet tall, and dominant breeders who have large eyes and are, on average, almost 6 feet tall. Both types of Greys have 4 fingers on each hand. This alliance emerged from the successful recovery of several apparently crashed Grey craft and the subsequent establishment of relations with this species. This relationship is, for the time being, clandestine by the choice of both parties and involves a very limited and gradual sharing of information and technology by the Greys. Note, this would seem to contradict the earlier statement that the DON is interested in defending our national security from malevolent alien species. However, we must understand that initially the decision of MJ-12 to establish contact with the Greys was partly motivated by national security concerns, for instance the desire for advanced weapons, the establishment of a treaty with the Greys in order to appease any intent on their part to take control, all the while studying them and their weaknesses. In reality, it seems as if some of the intelligence agencies were attempting to do to the Greys what they have done to other cultures, including our own. That is, use the treaties as a weapon against the Greys to infiltrate their operational structure and find out their weaknesses and exploit their technology at the same time. According to contactees, most of the human cultures who have been taken over in the past as a result of Trojan horse treaties with the Greys were sincerely blinded by the Greys' feigned platitudes of benevolence and friendship. The much more cynical and untrusting intelligence agencies of planet Earth, who were no strangers to war and betrayal, although hoping for the best, were at the same time preparing for the worst once the treaties were established. In the end, the choice of the Greys to play their hand and match wits with the intelligence agencies of planet Earth, whose cunning and expertise in manipulation are notorious, may ultimately be their downfall. Nevertheless, these agencies on Earth are playing a high-risk game. In their bid to gain galactic intelligence and technological parity with the Greys, they run the high risk of having many of their own agents fall under the psychological control of the Greys. In other words, while reaching one hand out in feigned friendship towards the Greys, the other hand is busy developing technological weaponry with the hope of potentially exploiting, conquering or destroying them just in case they turned on us. We must admit that there are various different motives in dealing with the Greys. The elite globalists of course need the Greys' mind control technology to assist in the implementation of their planetary dictatorship. Others want nothing to do with the Greys, but desire only their technology. In a strange twist of irony, the military alliance, and subsequent resistance, to the Greys may work for the eventual good of the planet. The reason for this is the fact that in their attempt to infiltrate and subvert our planet, the Greys made some grave underestimations. One of the major mistakes they made, probably out of fear of reprisals, resulting from the growing knowledge within intelligence agencies of the blatant betrayals of the treaties, was to jump the gun and attempt a planetary takeover before they were ready for it. They discovered that their methods, which have succeeded on other worlds, did not work quite as well on planet Earth. When the takeover came about, they were only able to conquer a large segment of the underground world, whereas their attempts to use their human agents on the surface to take control of the world above by precipitating a full totalitarian coup in America was strongly resisted. Because of this resistance, they could achieve no better than a stalemate. Now it is a tooth-and-nail battle between freedom-loving sovereigntist humans above and freedom-hating collectist reptilians below for control of the minds of the leaders of the military-industrial complex, which operates both above and below the surface of the planet. Whichever side comes out in control of the MIC will possess both worlds. The aliens are running scared because in 1989 their secret, the Enigma, came crashing through the surface and out into the open when Robert Lazar had the guts to come clean about what was happening at Area 51. Once he stood up to the beast, others joined him in his crusade: John Lear, William Cooper, Don Ecker, Paul Bennewitz, Krista Tilden, Val Valerian, Phil Schneider, Thomas Costello, Jason Bishop, Norio Hayakawa, Bill Hamilton, Agent Yellow Fruit, John Rhodes, Michael Lindemann, Michael Corbin, Commander X, Jim McCampbell, Robert Morningsky, Colonel Steve Wilson, Bill English, Jefferson Sousa, yours truly, etc. etc. I cannot name all of the names here as the list grows every day. Although many of these may have some heated personality and philosophical differences among themselves, they nevertheless have the same thing in common. Each of them possessed a different piece of the overall puzzle on the human-alien interaction. Once the dam broke, so to speak, what had previously been a situation that was out of control in respect to the United States government, became a situation that became out of control for the Greys. Expect some rather desperate attempts by the Greys in the future to resolve the situation and take back control. As I said, they are running out of time, and they are running scared, and desperate beings do desperate things. Will they simply concede defeat and leave this planet, or do they consider planet Earth and its resources to be the key to the continued survival of their empire? I personally get the feeling that the infernal leaders of the reptilian collective or hive have already invested too much in this planet to leave so easily. This means that the resolution of the situation will be up to the United States, and hopefully more than a little divine intervention. With this in mind, one might better understand the seemingly schizophrenic actions of the DON, CIA, NSA, MJ-12 and other agencies, which are being influenced and contested by basically three different groups with different agendas: those intent on maintaining true national security, those intent on selling out the United States for personal gain, and those in the middle who are just obeying orders and essentially don't know where they stand. Several sources claim that the United States Navy structure has been infiltrated to some extent by fascist elements operating deep within the CIA and NSA in an effort to use its organizational structure to serve their unconstitutional agendas, in most cases without the knowledge of most Navy personnel themselves. Through misrepresentation of their motives and intentions, these infiltrators have succeeded in gaining support from Navy personnel for their clandestine activities using the false facade of patriotism or national security, when in reality many of the joint NSA alien projects have in reality subverted the national security of the USA. Branton. Several underground and underwater facilities. At least one underwater facility is off the Florida coast and has a terrestrial access point in South Miami. I and my unseen cohorts have already provided the address to several individuals, have been established to support these joint operational activities and to provide a suitable habitat for the EBs involved. Parenthetically, the Multiple Protective Shelter (MPS) ICM basing scheme proposed in the early 1980s was actually a cover for the construction of 4,600 EB-related bunkers. This scheme was politically untenable and had to be abandoned, but would have allowed for a tremendous expansion of alien activity in the United States. There is presently an ongoing competition for influence, if not outright domination, over the Earth and its life forms between the Greys and another species commonly identified as reptilians or lizards. Note, it is interesting that several other sources claim that the Orion Greys are willfully working with and on behalf of the draconian lizards or reptiloids. Is the suggested animosity between the Greys and reptiloids a ruse to keep the government in a state of confusion, that is, to pressure them to make alliances with the Greys to fight the reptiloids, or vice versa, in order to ensure complete governmental submission to one or the other sides of a single alien collective power structure? Branton. It is supposedly known that this species ominously refers to itself as Earthlings. I was shown extremely clear photographs of examples of this species. Reptilians appeared human-sized, had 3 toes on each foot, and had notably large mouths, muzzles, with prominent teeth. This competition has resulted in the destruction of several craft both within and without the Earth's atmosphere, and has prompted the development of certain aspects of the United States Strategic Nuclear Forces as well as the Strategic Defense Initiative (SDI). The DON, Department of the Navy, conducts extensive surveillance and monitoring of individuals who are unknowingly part of an ongoing program of manipulation of the human gene pool by competing non-human alliances. This manipulation was initially undertaken by the reptilian species, apparently to direct certain human traits in ways favorable to this species. In addition, reptilian efforts have apparently focused on the United States and, to a lesser extent, its allies due to the United States' leading economic and military or military-industrial, Branton, role worldwide. Study has determined that the reptilian efforts in this area amount to long-term genetic sabotage. The reptilians have also been responsible for livestock mutilations and some human abductions for other negative purposes. Strangely, There is some historical connection between the reptilians and the development of nuclear energy, but this was only hinted at by my sources. Note, it is interesting that many of the nuclear scientists had ties with the Bavarian Illuminati. The bomb was developed at Los Alamos, beneath which some believe exists the major concentration of reptiloids/greys, those which commute underground to work in the lower Dulce base 90 miles away, in North America. And also there is an ancient Hopi prophecy about the greys and the part they would play in the creation of the God of Death. Did they want to provoke an inevitable nuclear conflict that they hoped would destroy all human life on planet Earth? The fact that the Greys interacted with the scientists of the Manhattan Project is evidenced by a personal friend of mine whose father was one such scientist. She has experienced numerous abductions throughout the years and claims to be a part of an alien program involving genetic manipulation. She did show me some unusual scale-like skin on her legs, a condition that I have not seen on any other person. Branton. However, the Grey abductions of human subjects have been aimed primarily at the creation of a particularly hardy elite hybrid species which would be initially capable of forming the leading elements of Grey society as well as serving a similar role in human society. Note, since the reptiloids/Greys have basically failed in producing an actual crossbreed capable of reproducing itself, they may instead opt for the development of a race of genetically altered humans or implanted clones, patched into the collective, who have been fused with some degree of reptilian DNA and once this has been accomplished transfer an individual and/or collective alien intelligence matrix into these genetically altered hosts as they have been known to do in some cases. There is some question as to whether the original soul of the individual is removed or suppressed when this occurs. Both may be possibilities, and one would probably need an aura detection device capable of seeing the multicolored soul chakras in order to determine whether that human has a soul or not. Nevertheless, this would be one manner in which an alien force could infiltrate a human society. In other cases, humans may be manipulated while in an altered state of mind while at the same time living a conscious life separate from and unaware of the induced alternate personality. I have encountered several cases, including my own, involving abductees who are living double lives. In these cases an alien, sleeper, or walk-in intelligence matrix has apparently been electronically implanted in these people via miniature artificial intelligence implants that are programmed with alien thought patterns and attached to the major nerve centers of the brain. Recently there has been some progress in mainstream science in regards to programming computers with human thought patterns, growing human brain tissue in a laboratory for use in organic computers, or direct mind-machine communication as is being developed for advanced jet pilots. The implant, in such cases, houses an individual or collective alien personality that is activated when the conscious identity is asleep. In this manner an alien parasite, whether malevolent, neutral or in very rare cases well-intentioned, may operate through the body of the host without the host being fully aware of just how his or her unconscious existence is being used or manipulated, for whatever purposes the aliens choose. As for the hybrids that have been developed by the Greys, another problem with producing an actual hybrid is that humans have souls whereas Greys do not. Therefore the hybrid must fall to one side or the other, soulish human or soulless reptilian, regardless of what the genetic physical makeup of the physical shell may be. I prefer to use the term hybrids to denote the hybrids who have been born with a soul matrix, and rebrides to denote those that have not. Branton. The hybrids would also be able to survive destructive ecological changes that the Greys believe will take place on Earth in the near future. The hybrids I saw had the appearance of human children with unusually large heads and eyes as well as fine, sparse hair. Earlier, and unsatisfactory, efforts supposedly resulted in a more fetus-like appearance on the part of these hybrids. All hybrids thus far produced are sterile and unable to reproduce. However, all hybrids have well-developed digestive systems. The implantation of bioelectronic devices in proximity to the central nervous systems of abductees has been utilized by the Greys for several complementary purposes, but the most important reason is in order to have a more reliable means of mind control at a distance. Such control is necessary in order to facilitate follow-up abductions and in order to prevent male subjects from having voluntary sterilizations. The Dawn has taken a very active, and largely successful, role in countering reptilian genetic sabotage. However, it is tasked with taking no role other than observation of Grey abductions, to the extent permitted by this group. This fact results in morale and control problems within this organization. Note, that is, they are to work to prevent alien sabotage of the human race, yet not interfere or try to prevent abductions that they know are occurring or going to occur. It's like MacArthur's forces in Korea. They were told by their UN superiors to keep the peace in South Korea and defend it from northern communist aggression, yet not attempt to destroy the main supply depots in the north from where the attacks were originating. As with the Korean conflict, the problem with the Greys would seem to be a no-win situation. No wonder there has been morale and control problems within the organization, and this may explain why an inner core within Navy intelligence is formed around agencies like the Cabal and Com-12, which are made up of patriots who are fed up with all of the waffling and compromise, an outright betrayal of our nation and our planet by unelected corporate collaborators working within the executive branch of government, and want to take direct action against the Greys. Branton. These morale problems have benefited me on more than one occasion, and I strongly believe that governmental collusion in these activities is unconstitutional. The Greys, like the reptilians, routinely attempt to erase the abduction-related memories of those they abduct. One of the most exotic elements of Grey technology exploited by the Dun involves the deliberate regulation of human brain activity, including telepathic communication, and propulsive technologies which include temporal and, for lack of a better term, transdimensional facets. Grey biotechnologies are, paradoxically, fundamentally primitive, but have some extremely advanced facets. Particularly significant is an ability to manufacture synthetic biological mechanical entities. I wonder if the so-called men in black, if they exist, are examples of these sorts of beings. The conditioning of human brain temporal lobe activity through electromagnetic and advanced medical techniques is used by the Dun in two primary ways. The most obvious is in the elimination of undesirable memories from the minds of accidental witnesses to Grey abductions. In this case, somewhat less reliable electromagnetic means must normally be utilized. The second, but actually more important use for this form of advanced mind control is in the elimination of undesirable memories in the minds of Dun personnel and other knowing participants in governmental activities relating to EBS. This latter form of hypnosis is normally done through more reliable medical or chemical means and is utilized for two reasons. The first reason is actually in the interests of the mental health of certain individuals unable to successfully cope with the unique psychic environment surrounding EB activities. The second reason to utilize voluntary mind control on government personnel is to delete information from the minds of these individuals, which could be exploited by either terrestrial or extraterrestrial forces. Dun field agents are therefore often referred to as zombies and their units as zombie squads. Voluntary erasers are far more reliable than those imposed upon the subject, especially if they have a surgical component. However, neither technique is absolutely reliable and, therefore, all erasers also include elements of disinformation implanted in the mind of the target agent which would tend to render any recalled accounts contradictory or otherwise unreliable. Zombies are also programmed against allowing themselves to be hypnotically regressed or otherwise medically examined by unauthorized personnel. This is particularly important as most of these agents have implants placed in their bodies by the Greys to supposedly monitor Dun compliance with mutual agreements. Note, the above is in reference to those agencies which integrate both CIA and Navy intelligence. According to an agent codenamed Panda, the Navy has been manipulated via the intelligence community, especially by the CIA and NSA, which has attempted to take full control of all military intelligence and bring it under the control of those human and alien influences who are running the collaboration projects. Branton, morale among Dun agents is particularly impaired by the obvious deterioration of mental and emotional function among these individuals as a result of these psychic interventions. The Department of Defense has been a primary beneficiary of alien-derived technologies which have been disseminated in a largely covert manner. In other words, even the military engineering units and defense contractors involved have been unaware of the actual source of key breakthrough technologies supplied to them. Although some alien technologies have been adopted, specifically in the hypersonic, group of pound signs, stealth and, group of pound signs, reconnaissance programs, and some anti-gravity drive extraterrestrial craft are now being actually duplicated. I was shown one hovering almost silently in a hangar at a subsite of the Nellis Air Force Base, and can state that rumors regarding such craft were accurate. The most significant alien technologies being acquired are supposedly in the field of computing. These technologies have provided the United States with a secret, and therefore largely theoretical, technological superiority over all other nations. I will also mention that I was flown aboard a helicopter of a design I had never before seen, which was not only unbelievably quiet, but could also cloak itself from being seen by the naked eye during the hours of darkness using a system which was referred to as ###. There is also an ongoing program of gradual societal conditioning to accept the existence and influence of abs in Earth's history. Does this include obvious fallacies that have been spread among intelligence agencies and abductees by the Greys, such as their claim that they originally genetically created the human race and placed them on planet Earth? Branton. This is being undertaken by the Dawn on a worldwide basis in order to prevent cultural disintegration in the event of an uncontrollable catastrophic leak of intelligence regarding the aliens, and also in order to allow for a more orderly eventual unveiling of the truth to the general public. The Greys have themselves promulgated a desire to overtly reveal themselves to human society by the turn of the century. Of course, passing themselves off as the good guys. However, at this point in time, when the overall malevolent activities of the Greys are being exposed, especially in network TV programs like Dark Skies, this would take an incredible feat of psychological engineering to accomplish. Branton. Accordingly, the Dawn, CIA and NSA elements within the Dawn, that is, Branton, currently has plans to eventually stage a First Contact event similar to that depicted in the film Close Encounters of the Third Kind, so as to prevent any immediate disclosure of the fact that First Contact actually took place 50 years ago, mid-1940s. This is only part of a classical psychological warfare program directed at the American people by their own government without appropriate authority. There is also a Dawn effort in progress to fully identify other alien entities which have had an impact on this planet. Specifically, there is an ape species known as that of the Birdman, which is believed to be somehow reptilian-related, variously known among sources as the Mothman, Chiakars, winged Draco, pterodactyls or pteroids. Branton. There is also an alien species which has been colloquially identified as the babies for their somewhat neonatal appearance. These might be some sort of hybrid humanoid. The interspecies rivalry currently in progress involves elements of what can only be termed espionage. In other words, both sides have utilized tactics and strategies usually associated with covert intelligence agencies. The most striking tactic employed by the reptilians is that of the false flag, which involves the portrayal of hostile reptilian actions as being those of more benign species. This particular technique has been focused on the United States government on several occasions and, in one instance that was recounted to me, resulted in the killing of numerous Greys by United States military forces. The dissemination of disinformation is also a favorite technique. The utilization of mind control techniques by both sides makes this particular espionage game a difficult one to comprehend or master. As they say, the truth is out there, but can we recognize it when we see it? Chapter 32. Revelations of an MJ-12 Special Studies Group Agent. Michael Wolff, in his trilogy The Catchers of Heaven, makes the following disclaimer at the beginning of his volume: the following events, which purport to involve the United States of America, the former Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, France, Belgium, Italy, Germany, Israel, and the UK, officially, according to repeated statements issued by all governments involved, never occurred. Incidentally, the author expressed a deep concern for the children of this planet and for the legacy we are leaving them, and therefore directed all of the royalties for his work to an organization devoted to helping children. To paraphrase some of the more relevant to this work points brought out in the trilogy: black budget operations utilizing billions of dollars raised by CIA drug running were classified above top secret, thereby escaping audit by federal auditors who possessed only a secret or top secret security clearance. We are now living, as of the latter part of the 20th century, in an unregulated, taxated, inflated economic slave system carefully designed to serve the elite. The author possessed one of the highest security clearances in the world, and reported only to the United States President, even though his knowledge and briefings of cosmic affairs often surpassed his one and only superior in several areas. He was warned against writing the trilogy, which contains sensitive information yet which deals mostly with his interactions with his friends and family on this and other worlds, by fellow friends and insiders within MJ-12. Wolff, however, chose to go ahead with the project as he felt that we have a right to know what's going on, and for the sake of the children and their future on this planet, swearing eternal hostility upon those WHO would rule the minds of men. Such tyranny, he insists, must end now. Also, Wolff states that many of the new generation of younger politicians and intelligence agents are trying to do away with the self-destructive policies of former administrations in regards to the alien scenario. The author claims to be a genetically engineered human who came from extraterrestrial Nordic genetic lines and was placed on this planet for a purpose. He possessed an above-genius mentality which made him an intelligence headhunter's dream come true. Even the presidents were aware of his talents and sought his expertise. His advanced mind led to his involvement with a super-secret project involving the development of an actual cyber-cloned humanoid with self-programming artificial intelligence if not sentience, as well as other projects involving super-advanced quantum mechanics that one will never hear about in the public domain, at least not for many years to come. Michael Wolff was raised in a Jewish family and experienced abduction/contacts ever since childhood, as had his human mother who became the host for his existence on planet Earth. The author also claims to have a genetic brother named Ase who served or serves as the Prince of the Alliance, a Nordic collective in Terra Aquila which is affiliated with the Corporate, a Grey species collective. Although the Human Alliance and the Grey Corporate interact or have interacted in the past with the other, the Nordic Alliance also maintained contact with the Federation of Worlds. The Grey Corporate in turn maintained an allegiance with something called the Unified Races of Orion. The Majestic 12 organization was aware of all three major Confederation groups: Small Bullet the Joint Humanoid Reptiloid Corporate/Alliance, Small Bullet the Mostly Humanoid Federation of Worlds or FO, Small Bullet the Mostly Reptiloid Unified Races of Orion or Euro. The Black programs are so named because presumably no one can shine a light on their activities and expose the corruption within. According to Agent Wolff, there can be governments within governments, and the black ones or secret government can be invisible to the electorate government itself. There are Nordic extraterrestrials walking the streets of several major cities on Earth, unknown by others for who they are. The author knew Dr. Edward Teller, the developer of the H-bomb, on a personal basis. The author was a member of an organization called the AlphaCom Team. The author at one point was visited by two FBI/NSC agents who reminded him that his introductory briefings on the alien subject must of necessity remain secret until it is all figured out, so as not to create mass panic or social instability. Note, actually the cosmic scenario seems to be more or less figured out at this point as far as myself and others are concerned, so such an excuse should be obsolete, and more so as time goes on. Brenton, the author states that in a hyperspatial environment, using a shipboard generation of amplified gravity waves, it isn't speed that increases, it is the relative time-space, when acted upon by a force such as gravity waves, which reduces itself within the hyperspace field generated around the hull of the craft where spacetime becomes warped. An Einstein-Rosen bridge wormhole created by a gravity-exerting craft in space is but one example. The Star Trek scenario may be based on an actual reality. Artificially created gravity waves can theoretically reduce time to near zero and acceleration to near infinity. Einstein only had a problem with gravity in his unified field theory, as it did not seem to fit, although he did come to the conclusion that gravity and acceleration were somehow connected. With such travel it is not space itself which is physically traversed, since space folds in on itself as gravity waves act upon time. The author refers to the work of Theodore Kaluza, who used the fifth dimension algebraically to equate Einstein's four-dimensional gravity with Maxwell's electromagnetism, and this extending of space-time to 5 dimensions instead of 4 was a foundation for further relational unification theoretical development. The author also speaks of quantum mathematical theories and calculations that allow for as many as 12 dimensions. However, he warns that one must be careful as the normal laws of human logic seem to break down the closer one delves into the subatomic or quantum levels of reality. A natural disaster may be imminent, considering that in 1951 1/4 of the land surface of planet Earth was forested, whereas today it is less than 1/5, and the oceans cannot soak up all of the excess atmospheric carbon dioxide. The Jason Project existed, and was discontinued after the war in Vietnam. On May 1, 1975, 2 Zeta Reticulum Greys were demonstrating a 100% power-producing annihilation reaction in a relatively small antimatter reactor, to 2 deep-cover scientists within the tunnels below Area 51, using a super-heavy element, bombarding it with protons. 1 Ret. 4, a slang term for a resident of the 4th planet of the Zeta 2 Reticuli system, was doing the display and demanded first that all rifles, and especially bullets in them, be removed from the room. The elite military guards refused to surrender their weapons, and in the chaotic disorder and commotion that ensued, 1 alien, 2 scientists and 41 military personnel were killed, simply because the colonel in charge of security questioned the Greys' orders. One witness to the scene survived. All the humans had died of head wounds and resultant damage of brain matter. Since no weapon was seen by this witness, the author suggested that the Greys might be able to use their minds as weapons, in essence using their brains as a biochemical circuit board through which to channel electromagnetic energy via specific neural patterns or pathways. This may explain, he suggests, why the Greys have the ability to walk or phase through solid matter, read minds, send mental messages, and are able to lift and float themselves as well as abductees without observable instrumentation. The Groom War or massacre ended certain exchanges between the government and the Greys. Note, other sources imply that this was only the initial incident in the Groom Wars, and that other incidents have since occurred resulting in the deaths or disappearance of aliens and human scientists, workers and military personnel. Branton, the author, was told by a Grey that his genetic Nordic brother, Prince Ananasira, was involved with arguing the human's case for existence before the corporate. Apparently these vermin have a rather high opinion of themselves for creatures that have no souls, and a low opinion of humankind, considering that humans are considered by many within the reptilian corporate as being unworthy for existence. Branton. The Alphacom team which Michael Wolff headed was or is the lead agency for Majestic 12's Special Studies Group, or MJ-12 SSG. The author initiated an organization called Project DART, Defense Alien Research Training, within the context of the C&E teams. The author was aware of and had even visited several of the following underground bases: Luke, Nevada; Roswell, New Mexico; Dayton, Ohio; Dulce, New Mexico; Nellis, Area S51 and S4, Nevada; an MJ-12 meeting center under the Greenbrier Hotel in White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia; Raven Rock or Site R001; Mount Weather, near Beaumont, Virginia; Mount Pony, near Culpeper, Virginia; the Viewtree Mountain Facility; Manzano Mountain Facility with rail tunnels to Kirtland F. Vincentia National Labs in New Mexico; and about 12 other underground facilities that cannot even be mentioned by name. Some of them have no names, just site numbers. There is a division within the intelligence community between those who want to attempt continued negotiations with the Greys and those who want to take military action against them. The author states that he and several others within MJ-12 had been abducted and manipulated by the Greys from childhood, or HIVed, you could say, suggesting that it was the Greys themselves that may have manipulated them into their positions within military intelligence. This does not necessarily mean that men like Michael Wolff were intentionally compromising our national security over to the Grey Collective. It may mean that they were the ones who must be dealt with and as a result the ones who were targeted for mental conditioning. The author tends to be for continued negotiations with the Greys, having been influenced by Nordic relatives of his, who share the Altair system with the Greys and are therefore pressed to maintain diplomatic relations with them, especially since the Greys are arguing the human's case for existence altogether. Note, it seems to be the old appease the enemy tactic like the one Neville Chamberlain tried to use with Hitler by essentially turning Czechoslovakia over to the mad dictator in an attempt to appease his appetite for conquest. In fact, it only increased Hitler's appetite and boldness, and he began viewing the Allies as pathetic cowards who would be willing to give in to his demands and intimidation. Have some members of MJ-12 aka PI-40 committed this same mistake with the Greys? Branton. All this does not mean that the Greys are completely beyond hope, however, considering that one of the Greys by the name of Colta had begun to show significant signs of emotional individualism because of his close contacts with the author. By referring to the Greys, we are in most cases referring to the individuality-killing collective hive itself. The MJ-12 Alphacom team which the author led, and some of the policies of MJ-12 itself, are being challenged to some degree by another agency operating within naval intelligence, known as the Cabal. MJ-12 is or was for negotiation with the Greys, especially in the higher magic levels, which tie in with the global power groups like the Rockefeller Empire, etc. according to other reports. However, some segments of MJ-12 are now working with Nordic or benevolent forces at Area 51 and elsewhere to develop a defense against the Greys in response to the continual betrayals of the treaties by the same. So MJ-12 seems to be a factioned agency to some degree, with some advocating negotiation, others advocating annihilation, and others advocating continued negotiation combined with continued development of Earth's Star Wars defenses in case the negotiations sour. The Cabal itself is far less wavering in its intent and makes no excuses about it. They apparently believe that there is enough evidence at hand from past interactions with the Greys that they will never abide by any established treaty, and that the only negotiation they understand is brute force. As Scotty of the old Star Trek series was known to say, sometimes the best negotiator is a fully loaded phaser bank. Although the Cabal and Com-12 may be excessively militant in some of their dealings with the Greys, can you really blame them? According to the Cabal, etc., the Greys have repeatedly shown that they cannot be trusted and therefore no more negotiations should be attempted or allowed between us and them. Colm McGrath, and Undersecretary of the Navy, initiated the Cabal Agency, as well as various projects involving neutral particle beam weapons and their hybrids which are intended to be used against the absurd Greys, and one would guess they're reptiloid overlords as well. The author's homeworld, so to speak, in that he possessed a Terran mother and apparently a Nordic father, as do a large number of young men and women now on Earth who possess Terran and extraterrestrial genetics, is in Altera, the fourth planet from the Sun called Altair, a very bright double variable star in the constellation Aquila at 15.7 light-years from Sol. Altair 4, as it is also known, possesses two moons, Alta 1 and Alta 2. The atmosphere of this planet, which is jointly occupied by Greys and Nordics, is controlled. No turbulence or violent weather patterns exist. The alien craft visiting planet Earth and other wild weather planets often find it difficult to navigate in our unpredictable atmosphere. On Altair or Altair 4 there are elevated cities, balanced on permanently created gravity waves. The author's Nordic brother, Prince Annan Essera, is the human moderator and chairman of the head council of the Corporate/Alliance of Planets, based on Altair. Note, the Corporate/Alliance is or was a Grey/Nordic Asterian collective, although it would seem that the Greys have subverted any human majority power or equality within the council in spite of the fact that the chairman is or was a Nordic. This might be the same ruse that some power-mongering forces on Earth have used. Namely, to allow the targeted culture to choose whatever president they wish, so long as the economic power and the councils are dominated by their own people. If much of the Grey majority is arguing the existence of the humans in Altair, and possibly on Earth, then isn't it fair for us on Earth to argue the existence of the Greys in our system, and in Altair? Although not an absolute collective like the reptilian empire based in Draconis, Boots, Orion and Reticuli, the Ashtar collective in Altair and other systems is constantly attempting to override the individuality factor of the humanoids and attempting to conform and assimilate them into the reptilian group mind. The ultimate dictatorship against individual freedom. This may be a major root of the current conflicts taking place between the reptiloids and humanoids within the Ashtar or Astarte collective. A conflict that has led to all-out warfare in Sirius B and elsewhere where the Ashtar collective is dominant. It is also apparent from Michael Walt's volume that one of the reasons why the author believes that peaceful negotiations must continue is because he may have been influenced by the deception that the Greys genetically created us. Several members of MJ-12 also hold to this dubious belief system, and have apparently been manipulated into their positions of power by lifelong encounters with the Greys. The Greys/reptiloids may have genetically altered certain human lines throughout history, however they certainly didn't create our race. And besides, how can a reptilian race possessing no soul matrix create a race that does? Incidentally, based on the accumulated data acquired from several independent sources, we can now establish a basic framework for the three major extraterrestrial confederations and identify some of the core star systems in this sector of the galaxy which lie at the very heart of each confederation. 1. The Corporate Collective, Humanoids, Reptiloids, the Ashtar Collective, etc. based in Altair Aquila, Sirius B, Arcturus, Aldebaran, Zeta I Reticuli, Bernard Star, Boots Centaurus, etc. 2. The Andromedan Federation, mostly but not entirely excluded to humanoids. An Andromeda constellation-backed federation based at Eta Pleiades, Vega Lyra, Yama Wolf 424, Procyon, Tau Ceti, Alpha Centauri, Epsilon Eridani, etc. 3. The Draconian Empire, mostly yet not entirely excluded to reptiloids. Based in Alpha Draconis, Epsilon Boots, Zeta 2 Reticuli, Polaris, Rigel Orion, Bellatrix Orion, Capella, etc. The Federation and Empire especially, have waged wars with each other in past centuries and millennia throughout the Sol system, in Lyra, and also the Pleiades, Orion, Procyon, Reticuli and Sirius. There are those who believe that the Greys are incapable of taming their own base animal or predatory instincts, and are conscious of little other than the drive to consume and increase their power base and feed their unbounded appetites, even if it means devouring and destroying other cultures or worlds in the process. Or, you might say they are operating under a locust mentality. Because the collectivist mindset automatically opposes sovereigntist philosophy, which advocates personal freedom and sovereignty, there are those who believe that the draconian/grey collective of its own initiative will not and cannot cease from its violations and abuses of human cultures throughout the galaxy unless forced to do so by humanoid cultures who have succeeded in taming their own base or lower predatory instincts. This could only be accomplished by those possessing a nature higher than the base predator of physical nature, by those capable of utilizing and exercising the power of their higher spiritual or solar natures. An extreme philosophy would be that the Greys/reptiloids, and in some cases insectoids or genetically engineered reptile-insectoid/insectilian hybrids, must be conquered and brought under the absolute and unconditional subservience to, or at least supervision of the humanoids, with no chance of again being allowed to attain equality or superiority over humanity, an unnatural superiority which has in the past been accomplished mainly as a result of their collective. Otherwise they will be an eternal thorn in the side of the human races and a threat to their prosperity or even existence for untold generations to come. The collective is the core of the problem. Find the control mainframes of the collective and the queens of the hive, and you will find the core of the problem. Branton, the author, states that the new quantum sciences tend to reject the Big Bang theory for universal creation and also the theory that the universe is in decay. To prove that the universe is in decay, scientists would have to prove that protons decay, which they have not yet been able to do. The Alphacom team released some of the captive Greys taken from crash sites, yet only after they were certain that these Greys could draw a logical parallel between the terror, fear, panic and fright that they experienced while they were guests of the United States government, and the fear and victimization that human abductees often feel when they are unwilling guests of the Greys. The Alphacom team was told that there is a growing number of young men and women on Earth who are half Terran and half Nordic extraterrestrial, whether they are consciously aware of this reality or not. They are apparently here on Earth to take part in some important mission, and most are silent or unknowing contactees from birth. The MJ-12 SSG Alphacom team was prepared to make a public announcement about the aliens at one point in time, however certain unpredictable factors led them to postpone the great announcement. The author's wife and only son died in a car accident after the author seemed to have a lapse in consciousness and drove over a cliff. Strangely, his wife and son were not in the wreckage when their bodies were found, although Michael Wolff's comatose body was. His staff and all of the field operatives under his command suggested that the accident may have been linked to an action taken against him by another deep-level intelligence agency. During contactee experiences, the author became friends with a silicon entity which had adopted him. This entity was actually a living conveyance or a starship with its own consciousness and identity, which the aliens had developed or grown through some process far more sophisticated than our own technology, although the author did admit that our own government was developing artificial intelligence craft, virtual flying computers, which could be used for a variety of purposes. The author was involved in briefing military officers from a number of countries concerning the aliens, officials from France, Israel, Russia, Japan, Belgium, Germany, Denmark, Norway, Italy, Canada, Mexico, etc., with each foreign dignitary being accompanied by their military and scientific support teams. One such major meeting occurred at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, near Dayton, Ohio. This is where a multi-leveled underground facility houses a whole warehouse of alien hardware and cadavers taken from crash retrieval sites over the past decades. MJ-12 has never been able to fully brief a Nordic-type alien before, not until the Nordics officially began working with segments of MJ-12 at Area 51, possibly sometime during the 1980s, following the Groom and Dulce Wars. Previously, they had never had an actual ET Nordic in captivity long enough to do so. It seems they simply said goodbye and disappeared. Note, other sources claim that many Nordic-type people have a natural ability to phase in and phase out of the third dimension. There is also the possibility that they may have been beamed out by their people. Branton - the MJ-12 SSG Alphacom team's mission objective was/is to determine the extent of visitation, the number and types of visitors, the many reasons for the visits, human interaction with them now and in the past, and a multiplicity of other related subjects such as intelligence on each visiting race. their sociology, ethics, morality or laws, cosmologies, degree of technical advancement, and specifically how we can negotiate with them and preparations for doing so. Chapter 33. Underground Bases, a lecture by Phil Schneider, May 1995. Phil Schneider versus the New World Order. Phil Schneider, a very brave man, recently lost his life due to what appeared to be a military-style execution in January 1996. He was found dead in his apartment with piano wire still wrapped around his neck. According to some sources, he had been brutally tortured repeatedly before being killed. Phil Schneider was an ex-government engineer who was involved in building underground bases. He was one of 3 people to survive the 1979 firefight between the Large Greys and the United States intelligence and military forces at Dulce underground base. Note, actually, one of several firefights, according to other sources. A man by the name of L. Anderson of Denver has informed this writer that the survivors of the Dulce Wars were taken and placed together in groups of 3 and told that they were the only survivors of the conflict. Apparently this was done to maintain more control over these personnel and prevent potential leaks of information. Branton, Phil Schneider. From Project Camelot website. Phil Schneider died on January 17, 1996, reportedly strangled by a catheter found wrapped around his neck, the bizarre death being dismissed by the authorities as suicide. If the circumstances of his death seem highly controversial, they are matched by the controversy over his public statements uttered shortly before his death. Phil Schneider was a self-taught geologist and explosives expert. Of the 129 deep underground facilities Schneider believed the United States government had constructed since World War II, he claimed to have worked on 13. 2 of these bases were major, including the much-rumored bioengineering facility at Dulce, New Mexico. At Dulce, Schneider maintained, gray humanoid extraterrestrials worked side by side with American technicians. In 1979, a misunderstanding arose. In the ensuing shootout, 66 Secret Service, FBI and Black Berets were killed along with an unspecified number of Greys. It was here he received a beam weapon blast to the chest which caused his later cancer. Many have confirmed that a large scar indeed existed. Schneider maintained that numerous previous attempts had been made on his life, including the removal of the nuts from one of the front wheels of his automobile. He had stated publicly he was a marked man and did not expect to live long. "If I ever commit suicide," Schneider told a close friend, "I'll have been murdered." Some of Schneider's more major accusations are worthy of attention. 1. The American government concluded a treaty with Gray aliens in 1954. This mutual cooperation pact is called the Grenada Treaty. 2. The space shuttle has been producing special alloys in orbit. A vacuum is needed for the creation of these special metals, thereby justifying the mandate for a large, permanently manned space station. 3. Much of our stealth aircraft technology was developed by back-engineering crashed alien craft. 4. AIDS was a population control virus invented by the National Ordnance Laboratory, Chicago, Illinois. 5. Unbeknownst to just about everyone, the United States government has an earthquake device. Neither the 1995 Kobe earthquake nor the 1989 San Francisco quake had a pulse wave. 6. The World Trade Center bomb blast and the Oklahoma City blast were achieved using small nuclear devices. The melting and pitting of the concrete and the extrusion of metal supporting rods indicated this. Schneider's forte, he claimed, was explosives. Finally, Phil Schneider lamented that the democracy he loved no longer existed. We had become instead a technocracy ruled by a shadow government intent on imposing their own view of things on all of us, whether we like it or not. He believed 11 of his best friends had been murdered in the last 22 years, 8 of whose deaths had been officially explained as suicides. Whatever one might think of Phil Schneider's claims, it's clear that he was of particular interest to the FBI and CIA. His widow has stated that intelligence agents thoroughly searched the premises shortly after his death and made off with at least a third of the family photographs. Phil Schneider Lecture, Part 1. In May 1995, Phil Schneider did a lecture on what he had discovered. 7 months later he was tortured and killed by those for whom he had previously worked. This man's final act should not go unnoticed. It is because of the horrendous structure of the federal government that I feel directly imperiled to tell anybody about this material. How long I will be able to do this is anybody's guess. However, I would like to mention that this talk is going to be broken up into 4 main topics. Each of these topics will have some bearing on what you people are involved in, whether you are patriots or not. I want you to know that these United States are a beautiful place. I have gone to more than 70 countries, and I cannot remember any country that has the beauty, as well as the magnificence of its people, like these United States. To give you an overview of basically what I am, I started off and went through engineering school. Half of my school was in that field, and I built up a reputation for being a geological engineer, as well as a structural engineer with both military and aerospace applications. I have helped build two main bases in the United States that have some significance as far as what is called the New World Order. The first base is the one at Dulce, New Mexico. I was involved in 1979 in a firefight with alien humanoids, and I was one of the survivors. I'm probably the only talking survivor you will ever hear. Two other survivors are under close guard. I am the only one left that knows the detailed files of the entire operation. 66 Secret Service agents, FBI, Black Berets and the like, died in that firefight. I was there. Number 1, part of what I am going to tell you is going to be very shocking. Part of what I am going to tell you is probably going to be very unbelievable, though, instead of putting your glasses on, I'm going to ask you to put your skepticals on. But please, feel free to do your own homework. I know the Freedom of Information Act isn't much to go on, but it's the best we've got. The local law library is a good place to look for congressional records. So, if one continues to do their homework, then one can be standing vigilant in regard to their country. Deep underground military bases and the black budget. I love the country I am living in, more than I love my life, but I would not be standing before you now, risking my life, if I did not believe it was so. The first part of this talk is going to concern deep underground military bases and the black budget. The black budget is a secretive budget that garners 25% of the gross national product of the United States. The black budget currently consumes $1.25 trillion per 2 years. At least this amount is used in black programs, like those concerned with deep underground military bases. Presently, there are 129 deep underground military bases in the United States. They have been building these 129 bases day and night, unceasingly, since the early 1940s. Some of them were built even earlier than that. These bases are basically large cities underground connected by high-speed magneto-leviton trains that have speeds up to Mach 2. Several books have been written about this activity. Al Billick has my only copy of one of them. Richard Sauter, a Ph.D. architect, has risked his life by talking about this. He worked with a number of government agencies on deep underground military bases. In around where you live, in Idaho, there are 11 of them. The average depth of these bases is over a mile, and they again are basically whole cities underground. They all are between 2.66 and 4.25 cubic miles in size. They have laser drilling machines that can drill a tunnel 7 miles long in one day. The Black Project sidestepped the authority of Congress, which as we know is illegal. Right now, the New World Order is depending on these bases. If I had known at the time I was working on them that the new was involved, I would not have done it. I was lied to rather extensively. Development of military technology, implied German interest in hyperspatial technology, and more. Basically, as far as technology is concerned, for every calendar year that transpires, military technology increases about 34.5 years compared with the increase rate of conventional technology. This is why it is easy to understand that back in 1943 they were able to create, through the use of vacuum tube technology, a ship that could literally disappear from one place and appear in another place. My father, Otto Oskar Schneider, fought on both sides of the war. He was originally a U-boat captain, and was captured and repatriated in the United States. He was involved with different kinds of concerns, such as the A-bomb, the H-bomb and the Philadelphia experiment. He invented a high-speed camera that took pictures of the first atomic hydrogen or H-bomb, Branton test at Bikini Island on July 12, 1946. I have original photographs of that test, and the photos also show UFOs fleeing the bomb site at a high rate of speed. Bikini Island at the time was infested with them, especially under the water, and the natives had problems with their animals being mutilated. At the time, General MacArthur felt that the next war would be with aliens from other worlds. Anyway, my father laid the groundwork with theoreticians about the Philadelphia experiment, as well as other experiments. What does that have to do with me? Nothing, other than the fact that he was my father. I don't agree with what he did on the other side, but I think he had a lot of guts in coming here. He was hated in Germany. There was a $1 million reward, payable in gold, to anyone who killed him. Obviously, they didn't succeed. Anyway, back to our topic, deep underground bases. The firefight at Dulce base. Back in 1954, under the Eisenhower administration, the federal government decided to circumvent the Constitution of the United States and form a treaty with alien entities. It was called the 1954 Greta Treaty, which basically made the agreement that the aliens involved could take a few cows and test their implanting techniques on a few human beings, but that they had to give details about the people involved. Slowly, the aliens altered the bargain until they decided they wouldn't abide by it at all. Back in 1979, this was the reality, and the firefight at Dulce occurred quite by accident. I was involved in building an addition to the deep underground military base at Dulce, which is probably the deepest base. It goes down 7 levels and over 2.5 miles deep. At that particular time, we had drilled 4 distinct holes in the desert, and we were going to link them together and blow out large sections at a time. My job was to go down the holes and check the rock samples, and recommend the explosive to deal with a particular rock. As I was headed down there, we found ourselves amidst a large cavern that was full of outer space or inner space. Branton aliens, otherwise known as large greys. I shot 2 of them. At the time, there were 30 people down there. About 40 more came down after this started, and all of them got killed. We had surprised a whole underground base of existing aliens. Later, we found out that they had been living on in our planet for a long time. This could explain a lot of what is behind the theory of ancient astronauts. Note, this report seems to reveal a limited perspective on the overall Dulce war conflicts based on the experience of one individual. It appears, however, as if there was much more involved in the overall scenario than what Phil Schneider describes. For instance, from Phil's description, it appears as if his team broke into the base accidentally. It could be that in response to the captured scientists mentioned by Thomas Edwin Costello and others, the Special Forces and Intel agents intentionally attempted to break into the underground alien bases through a back door, so to speak, yet Schneider may have not been aware of this part. Other reports would suggest that the conflict was more complex than this, and involved more than one firefight. According to other sources, the Dulce Wars involved at least 100 highly trained special forces. Branton, anyway, I got shot in the chest with one of their weapons, which was a box on their body, that blew a hole in me and gave me a nasty dose of cobalt radiation. I have had cancer because of that. I didn't get really interested in UFO technology until I started work at Area 51, north of Las Vegas. After about 2 years recuperating after the 1979 incident, I went back to work for Morrison and Knudsen, for example at GE and other companies. At Area 51, they were testing all kinds of peculiar spacecraft. How many people here are familiar with Bob Lazar's story? He was a physicist working at Area 51 trying to decipher the propulsion factor in some of these craft. Schneider's worries about government factions, railroad cars and shackle contracts. Now, I am very worried about the activity of the federal government. They have lied to the public, stonewalled senators, and have refused to tell the truth in regard to alien matters. I can go on and on. I can tell you that I am rather disgruntled. Recently, I knew someone who lived near where I live in Portland, Oregon. He worked at Gunderson Steel Fabrication, where they make railroad cars. Now, I knew this fellow for the better part of 30 years, and he was kind of a quiet type. He came in to see me one day, excited, and he told me they are building prisoner cars. He was nervous. Gunderson, he said, had a contract with the federal government to build 10,720 full-length railroad cars, each with 143 pairs of shackles. There are 11 subcontractors in this giant project. Supposedly, Gunderson got over $2 billion for the contract. Bethlehem Steel and other steel outfits are involved. He showed me one of the cars in the rail yards in North Portland. He was right. If you multiply 10,720 times 143 times 11, you come up with about 15 million. This is probably the number of people who disagree with the federal government. No more can you vote any of these people out of office. Our present structure of government is technocracy, not democracy, and it is a form of feudalism. Note, I would venture to say that it is more like a techno-monarchy, since several of the United States presidents have been placed in office with Rockefeller financial and media backing, suggesting that these same presidential hirelings were inclined to favor certain Rockefeller and in turn international banking agendas. Technomonarchy would constitute those parts of the military-industrial complex or MIC that are largely influenced by Rockefeller interests. According to various sources, the German immigrant Rockefellers are not the top of the ladder for the world conspiracy. True, they control much of the eco-political system in the United States of America, however they are following the agenda of the Bilderberger cult, the 13 Wicca Masons, 13 black nobility, and 13 Maltese Jesuits who have joined together under the covering of the Bavarian Illuminati, which in turn is the modern manifestation of the joined human alien serpent cult, which seems to have had its origins within the ancient underground Masonic systems of Egypt, a cult or collaboration that was brought to Bavaria by the early Germanic trade guilds during the height of the so-called Holy Roman German Empire. Branton. This technocracy has nothing to do with the Republic of the United States. These people are godless, and have legislated out prayer in public schools. You can get fined up to $100,000 and 2 years in prison for praying in school. I believe we can do better. I also believe that the federal government is running the gambit of enslaving the people of the United States. I am not a very good speaker, but I'll keep shooting my mouth off until somebody puts a bullet in me, because it's worth it to talk to a group like this about these atrocities. America's black program contractors. There are other problems. I have some interesting 1993 figures. There are 29 prototype stealth aircraft presently. The budget from the United States Congress 5-year plan for these is $235.6 million. You couldn't buy the spare parts for these black programs for that amount. So, we've been lied to. The black budget is roughly $1.3 trillion every 2 years. A trillion is 1,000 billion. $1 trillion weighs 11 tons. The United States Congress never sees the books involved with this clandestine pot of gold. Contractors of these programs, for example G. Westinghouse, McDonnell Douglas, Morrison Knudsen, Wackenhut Security Systems, Boeing Aerospace, Glorimer Aerospace, Aerospatial in France, Mitsubishi Industries, Ryder Trucks, Bechtel, IG Farben, plus a host of hundreds more. Is this what we are supposed to be living up to as freedom-loving people? I don't believe so. Star Wars an apparent alien threat. Still, 68% of the military budget is directly or indirectly affected by the black budget. Star Wars relies heavily upon stealth weaponry. By the way, none of the stealth program would have been available if we had not taken apart crashed alien discs. None of it. Some of you might ask what the space shuttle is shuttling. Large ingots of special metals that are milled in space and cannot be produced on the surface of the Earth. They need the near vacuum of outer space to produce them. We are not even being told anything close to the truth. I believe our government officials have sold us down the drain, lock, stock and barrel. Up until several weeks ago, I was employed by the United States government with a Rhyolite 38 clearance factor, one of the highest in the world. I believe the Star Wars program is there solely to act as a buffer to prevent alien attack. It has nothing to do with the Cold War, which was only a ploy to garner money from all the people. For what? The whole lie was planned and executed for the last 75 years. Stealth aircraft technology used by the United States agencies and the United Nations. Here's another piece of information for you folks. The Drug Enforcement Administration, D, and the ATF rely on stealth tactical weaponry for as much as 40% of their operations budget. This in 1993, and the figures have gone up considerably since. The United Nations used American stealth aircraft for over 28% of its collective worldwide operations from 1990 to 1992, according to the Center for Strategic Studies and UN Report 3092. The Guardians of Stealth and Delta Force Origins of the Bosnia Conflict. The Guardians of Stealth. There are at least 3 distinct classifications of police that guard our most well-kept secrets. Number 1, the Military Joint Tactical Force, MJTF, sometimes called the Delta Force or Black Berets, is a multinational tactical force primarily used to guard the various stealth aircraft worldwide. By the way, there were 172 stealth aircraft built. 10 crashed, so there were at last count about 162. Bill Clinton signed them away about 6 weeks ago to the United Nations. There have been indications that the Delta Force was sent over to Bosnia during the last days of the Bush administration as a covert sniper force, and that they started taking pot shots at each side of the controversy, in order to actually start the Bosnia conflict, that would be used by succeeding administrations for political purposes. Thoughts on the bombings in the United States? I was hired not too long ago to do a report on the World Trade Center bombing. I was hired because I know about the 90-some-odd varieties of chemical explosives. I looked at the pictures taken right after the blast. The concrete was puddled and melted. The steel in the rebar was literally extruded up to 6 feet longer than its original length. There is only one weapon that can do that, a small nuclear weapon. That's a construction-type nuclear device. Obviously, when they say that it was a nitrate explosive that did the damage, they are lying 100%, folks. The people they have in custody probably didn't do the crime. As a matter of fact, I have reason to believe that the same group held in custody to do other crimes, such as killing a Jewish rabbi in New York. However, I want to further mention that with the last explosion in Oklahoma City, they are saying that it was a nitrate or fertilizer bomb that did it. First, they came out and said it was a 1,000-pound fertilizer bomb. Then, it was 1,500. Then 2,000 pounds. Now it's 20,000. You can't put 20,000 pounds of fertilizer in a Ryder truck. Now, I've never mixed explosives, per se. I know the chemical structure and the application of construction explosives. My reputation was based on it. I helped hollow out more than 13 deep underground military bases in the United States. I worked on the Moda project, in West Germany, in Spain and in Italy. I can tell you from experience that a nitrate explosion would not have hardly shattered the windows of the federal building in Oklahoma City. It would have killed a few people and knocked part of the facing off the building, but it would never have done that kind of damage. I believe I have been lied to, and I am not taking it any longer, so I'm telling you that you've been lied to. Phil Schneider Lecture, Part 2. With the preceding confirmation of his claims, we now return to the Phil Schneider Lecture. Branton, the truth behind the Republican contract with America. I don't perceive at this time that we have too much more than 6 months of life left in this country, at the present rate. We are the laughingstock of the world, because we are being hoodwinked by so many evil people that are running this country. I think we can do better. I think the people over 45 are seriously worried about their future. I'm going to run some scary scenarios by you. The contract with America. It contains the same terminology that Adolf Hitler used to subvert Germany in 1931. I believe we can do better. The contract with America, or is it the contract on America? Branton, is a last-ditch effort by our federal government to tear away the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Some statistics on the black helicopter presence. The black helicopters. There are over 64,000 black helicopters in the United States. For every hour that goes by, there is one being built. Is this the proper use of our money? What does the federal government need 64,000 tactical helicopters for, if they are not trying to enslave us? I doubt if the entire military needs 64,000 worldwide. I doubt if all the world needs that many. There are 157 F-117A stealth aircraft loaded with LiDAR and computer-enhanced imaging radar. They can see you walking from room to room when they fly over your house. They see objects in the house from the air with a variation limit of 1 inch to 30,000 miles. That's how accurate it is. Now, I worked in the federal government for a long time, and I know exactly how they handled their business. Government earthquake device, AIDS as a bioweapon based on alien excretions. The federal government has now invented an earthquake device. I am a geologist, and I know what I am talking about. With the Kobe earthquake in Japan, there was no pulse wave as in a normal earthquake. None. In 1989, there was an earthquake in San Francisco. There was no pulse wave with that one either. It is a Tesla device that is being used for evil purposes. The black budget programs have subverted science as we know it. Look at AIDS, invented by the National Ordnance Laboratory in Chicago, Illinois in 1972 and passed to the United Nations, World Health Organization via the Military Biogenetics Facility at Fort Detrick, Maryland to be injected into smallpox vaccines in Africa and hepatitis II vaccines in America, according to Drs. William Campbell Douglas, Alan Cantwell, Jr. and Dr. Robert Strecker, Branton. It was a biological weapon to be used against the people of the United States. The reason I know this is that I have seen the documentation by the Office of Strategic Services, which by the way is still in operation to this day, through the CDC in Atlanta. They used the glandular excretions of animals, humans and alien humanoids to create the virus. According to the above-mentioned doctors, part of the production of the virus involved the splicing of the bovine leukemia and sheep visna viruses and conserved human tissue cultures. Branton, these alien humanoids the government is hobnobbing with are the worst news. There is absolutely no defense against their germs, none. They are a biological weapon of terrible consequence. Every alien gray on the planet needs to be isolated. Saddam Hussein killed 3.5 million Kurdish people with a similar biological weapon. Do we, the people of this planet, deserve this? No, we don't, but we are not doing anything about it. Every moment we waste, we are doing other people on the planet a disservice. Right now, I am dying of cancer that I contracted because of my work for the federal government. I might live 6 months. I might not. I will tell you one thing. If I keep speaking out like I am, maybe God will give me the life to talk my head off. I will break every law that it takes to talk my head off. 11 of my best friends in the last 22 years have been murdered. 8 of the murders were called suicides. Before I went to talk in Las Vegas, I drove a friend down to Joshua Tree, near 29 Palms. I drove into the mountains in order to get to Needles, California, and I was followed by 2 government E-350 vans with G-14 plates, each with a couple of occupants, one of which had an Uzi. I knew exactly who they were. I have spoken 19 times and have probably reached 45,000 people. Well, I got ahead of them and came to a stop in the middle of the road. They both went on either side of me and down a ravine. Is this what it's going to take? I cut up my security card and sent it back to the government, and told them if I was threatened, and I have been, that I was going to upload 140,000 pages of documentation to the internet about secret government structure and the whole plan. I have already begun the task. Thank you very much. End of May 1995 lecture. Chapter 34. I've thought about an eloquent way to end this volume with a flourish of cosmic wisdom that would bring the entire contents of this work into perspective and balance, an ending that would be worthy of all of those brave truth-seekers who have so generously contributed to this project. Having failed to do this, I will gladly give this opportunity to one who should know, more than anyone else, just exactly what we as a planet are going through in our struggle for freedom from interventionist oppression. The following appeared in Val Valerian's Matrix to work, and although I've made some interjections throughout, I would ask that you pay special attention to the words of a certain Nordic, born among the stars, who can fully sympathize with our plight here on Earth. But first, some words of introduction from Val Valerian, the Greys, the Nordics, and interstellar conflict. The first type of Grey is the short gray humanoids, with the large heads, which resemble embryos and average about 4.5 feet in height. They are from Rigel. Rigel is a double bluish-white star on the left foot of Orion. It is this type of humanoid that is performing most of the animal mutilations and human mutilations, which has made a secret deal with our government, and which was in contact with Hitler Nazis. They derive nourishment from the glandular secretions and the enzymes they extract from the animals they mutilate, which they absorb through their pores. Our government permits such activities partially because of its acute fear of these beings, and partially because it is under the delusion that they will give us technical information enabling us to attain military superiority over the Russians in exchange for permitting the mutilations and abductions. The stealth bomber and Star Wars technologies are being obtained from them. However, our government does not appear to realize that when it comes to the crunch the technology they are transmitting will not work as it is supposed to. Note, more advanced technologies have been obtained via crash retrievals, an aspect that the aliens may have underestimated. Branton. It is not in their interest to give us decisive military superiority over the Russians, or vice versa. It is in their interest to keep us in a state of unresolved conflict with each other, the old game of divide and conquer. Working under the instructions of the humanoids from Rigel, CIA and former Nazi scientists have developed and deployed malignant strains of bacteria and viruses, including AIDS. The rationale from the fascist point of view is to exterminate portions of the population considered to be undesirable. The rationale from the Rigelian point of view is to decimate the human population to such an extent that the survivors would accept, not resist, open control by the Rigelians. The humanoids that have been nicknamed Swedes are on the average between 6 and 6.5 feet tall. Some are from a solar system that revolves around Procyon, a binary yellow-white and yellow star system that rises before Sirius in Canis Minoris in the body of the Lesser Dog, about 11.4 light-years from Earth. They are from the fourth planet in orbit around the Procyon double star system. The tall blonde humanoids from Procyon and the short gray humanoids from Rigel have been enemies for thousands of years. The tall blondes from Procyon have a benign attitude toward humanity, except for their strong disapproval of our inhumanity to each other. This strong disapproval is further intensified by our government having made a secret alliance with their hereditary enemies, in order to obtain even more destructive weapons systems than those already in existence. Our government is not interested in negotiating with the Procyonians, as they would not provide us with weapon systems. Their motivation for breeding with humans is to tune up the frequency of our species, in order to help us to help ourselves. Their concern is for the well-being of all forms of life, not just humanity. The entire biosphere will benefit if we fulfill our positive potential, instead of self-destructing our planet's biosphere in the process. It would be a mistake to count on them to clean up the mess we have made of our polluted planet, or to bring peace by dismantling our nuclear weapons. It is up to us to solve the problems that we have ourselves created. In order to extricate ourselves from the covert alliance the CIA and their Nazi SS predecessors Branton had made with Rigel, without our knowledge or consent, we must first regain control of our government. Valerian then quotes the following words of one Procyon star traveler by the name of Kyla, who revealed the following to an unnamed Earth woman with whom he had established contact. Tyrants have been defeated many times on many planets, in countless solar systems and galaxies. How strange it is that as soon as one tyrant of any species is thought to be banished forever, another always, but always, takes his place. The idealistic revolutionaries who defeated King George III in America went on to oppress the Indians and blacks. Many of those who fought most courageously against the Axis powers of fascism later became fascists themselves, as is demonstrated by the present plight of the Palestinians, Afghans, Chileans and Nicaraguans. Yes, you must try to regain control of your government, but if so much as one individual involved in this process has not first gained control of his or her selfhood, it will be for naught. One can never defeat or gain control of anything but oneself. Those destined to outstir the Rigelians must always keep track of the state of their selfhood, and learn first to defeat within themselves the essence of that which is tyranny. Through this type of awareness, they will know when to and when not to act. Through understanding a hostile entity to be but one of the ineffable countless facades, it loses its power over you. Through the ability to wisely perceive a hostile entity, you may gain control of it. In overcoming the Rigelians, one must take great precautions not to become oneself the enemy. Or, as the old Chinese proverb says, beware when fighting a dragon that you do not become one. Kyla, the Procyon's intelligence agent, continues, if you were a highly advanced culture about to invade a relatively primitive culture, you would not do it with a flourish of ships showing up in the heavens, and take the risk of being fired upon. That's the type of warfare less evolved mortals would get into. You would begin by creating intense confusion, with only inferences of your presence, inferences which cause controversial disagreement. Note, it is interesting that the major intelligence projects designed to discredit UFO witnesses and cause confusion and contention among, and infiltration of, various UFO research organizations have been traced back to the Nazified NSA-CIA, which in turn maintains, as this is being written, continued ties with the Greys. Branton. You would go to the most secret and powerful organizations within the society. In the case of the United States, you would infiltrate the CIA, and through the use of techniques unknown to them, you would take over some of the key people in their innermost core group. You would proceed in the same fashion to take over key members of the KGB. You would also create great dissension among the public at large, some individuals and groups insisting that they have seen UFOs, others insisting with equal vehemence that such a thing is not possible, and that they are either liars or deluded. You would involve the planet's two major nations in an ongoing idiotic philosophical dispute, keeping them constantly at each other's throats over such questions as whether Thomas Jefferson was greater than Karl Marx or vice versa. That is, whether capitalist tyranny or communist tyranny is worse than the other. By the way, don't confuse communism with communalism, and don't confuse capitalism with democracy. Communalism and democracy are sovereigntist movements that respect the personal rights and freedoms of others. So-called unrestrained communism and capitalism are codependent collectivist evils. Capitalist tyranny created communist tyranny, and communist tyranny justifies its existence as a force to fight capitalist tyranny. Insane world we live in, is it not? Branton. You would keep them continuously occupied with quarreling like two adolescent boys trying to prove their masculinity over who has which piece of territory, whether one has the right to invade Afghanistan or the other has the right to invade Nicaragua, persistently exchanging threats and insults like a couple of macho teenagers, while arguing whether one should dismantle one type of nuclear warhead, or the other should dismantle another type of nuclear warhead. As you watched all this, you would sit back and you would laugh, if you had the capacity to laugh. You would occasionally let your ships be seen by some of the ordinary citizens, so that the elite governmental groups would become involved in attempts to keep them quiet, clumsily squelching attempts to make information about UFO activity public. This would result in the mass population losing confidence in the veracity of their elected officials. There would be constant arguments between the authorities and the public as to whether or not the persistently reported phenomena genuinely existed, thereby setting the population and the government at each other's throats. You would have already set the two major superpowers at each other's throats. By subtly causing economic turmoil, you would set the haves and the have-nots at each other's throats. In all possible ways, you would plant the seeds of massive discontent. After you had manipulated the population to the point where your covert control over it was complete, you might decide to go overt, and let a few ships land in public. But you would not go from covert to overt until you were sure of the totality of your control. Those who have experienced UFO sightings or ET close encounters will constantly be at odds with the government, which will continue to retaliate by stigmatizing them as liars or deluded. The impoverished will become even more impoverished, and more filled to overflowing with explosively righteous anger. The wealthy will cling even more greedily to the wealth that they already have, creating a social atmosphere of sheer desperation and complete confusion. To add to that, there will be series after series of natural disasters, some genuinely natural, some human-induced through aberrant scientific activities such as underground nuclear testing, others deliberately induced by the Greys through the scalar type Branton technology they are in possession of. When approximately 3/4 of the planet's population has been eliminated in this fashion, the Greys can then make an overt appearance as saviors from the skies, distributing food and medicine to the survivors. As the survivors line up to receive their quotas of food and medicine, implants will be inserted, supposedly to aid in further food distribution, actually to guarantee complete Grey control with no possibility of rebellion. Note, electronic chip implants have already been developed. These operate on bodily temperature changes, and it is interesting that the part of the body which experiences the greatest ranges of temperature change are the forehead and the hands, which is interesting when compared to the prophecies in the 13th chapter of the Book of Revelation. These chips will not only serve to control individuals, but will also be able to track their every movements by satellite. One individual who worked on such a chip stated that the implant would decay after a certain period of time, at which point a poisonous virus would be released into the bloodstream of those who had received it, eventually killing the person and effecting a type of automatic population control for the electronically controlled society. Branton. From the point of view of the Greys, terrestrial humanity will have been reduced to manageable numbers and to eternal submission. Humanity is not about to be invaded. Humanity is not in the middle of an invasion. Humanity has been invaded. The invasion has taken place, and is nearly in its final stages. Great invasions do not happen with thundering smoke and nuclear weaponry. That is the mark of an immature society. Great invasions happen in secrecy. You throw a crumb out here and there. You bribe the United States government with a few tidbits, a stealth bomber, a Star Wars system. You encourage the government to think that the UFO researchers indeed threaten the security of this great secret they have. You tempt and tease the Soviet Union with a laser system far finer than any their own scientists could think of. And you always keep that subtle inference just on the borderline of consciousness that the elusive will-o'-the-wisps termed UFOs may in fact exist, yet you persistently repress this borderline perception, and make it seem so insane that there is a social stigma attached to declaring one's conviction that the phenomena are in fact real. While all this confusion is going on, the Greys are gradually changing you over. The inner core of the CIA is deeply controlled by the Greys. The CIA see the Greys as a path to greater scientific achievement, as a way of overpowering the Soviet enemy. Note, since the overt breakup of the Soviet Union, the Greys may provoke a new Cold War with another superpower, possibly China. It has also been suggested that the Bavarians engineered the dissolution of the Soviet Empire because at the time their agenda called for a merger of the East and West into a Bavarian-backed New World Order. In other words, for this to occur, Russia had to become less communist and America had to become less capitalist so that they could both merge somewhere within the realm of democratic socialism, with more than a little help from the UN or United Nations organization. Branton. Surprisingly enough, the obtuse collective mentality type that makes up the bulk of the CIA also makes up the bulk of the more fanatical star people, those who babble and mush and gush so endlessly. All those who have to cleave to or be fused with some form of group mentality, most notably, the Ashtar Collective, much of which according to contactee Israel Norkin has been infiltrated and taken over by the unholy six star systems of Orion, Branton, leave themselves wide open. They have already been taken over. There is a large and ever-growing cult of contactees who think of the Greys as liberators, sincerely believing them to be heavenly star brothers who have come to help humanity. Note, one common brand of intellectual defecation that the Greys have been spewing forth through their human channels is that the Greys are really the good guys, and that they have been conquered and exploited by the reptiloids and therefore are working with the secret government in an attempt to throw off the yoke of their oppressors. Anyone who is at all familiar with Grey mentality should know that they are willfully working with the reptiloids, and that they are reprobate liars who have no conscience whatever when it comes to using multi-level deceptions to get their way. Unfortunately, many metaphysical-minded Grey huggers are accepting these lies and others like them. Other lies that have originated from the Greys include, small bullet, we are the genetic creations of the Greys, so we must submit to our creators. Small bullet, Jesus Christ was a genetic creation of the Greys. Interesting, in that Jesus blasted the serpent race in more than one instance. Small bullet, the Greys are a superior race. They may be superior intellectually, however they have no internal or eternal soul matrix as do humans, and so from a spiritual perspective they are inferior, in essence being little more than predators with brains. Branton. The reason the awful little Greys mutilate animals is the stuff that they eat. They eat pulverized hormonic secretions, what you would call subtle essences. They live on the stuff of life. There is something death-like about their species. They always bring about the death of animation, the death of individuality. How do I know? I am a blonde from Procyon. We were a culture that could travel through time, that is, phase through various time-space dimensions or densities where the flow of time and frequency space are different from the time-space dimensions of the third dimension. Branton, but also lived on a planetary sphere. And the little Greys, our insidious little friends, did to us exactly what they are doing now to you. This is what happened to our planet. Having come in war, but having been unable to obtain any decisive victory, the Greys expressed the desire to make peace. We had not wanted to fight with the survivors of the Rigelian Great War to begin with, and gladly accepted their offer. As time went by, they said they wished to normalize relations and be our friends. We were in doubt as to whether it would be safe to trust them, and debated the issue for a long time before finally deciding that we should trust them. The Greys began to visit us, first a few as ambassadors, then as specialists in various domains where their expertise could be useful to us, as participants in different programs that developed which involved mutual collaboration, and finally as tourists. What had begun as a trickle became a flood, as they came in ever-increasing numbers, slowly but surely infiltrating our society at all levels, penetrating even the most secret of our elite power groups. Just as on your planet they began by unobtrusively gaining control over key members of the CIA and KGB through techniques unknown to them, such as hypnosis. So on Procyon through the same techniques, whose existence we were not aware of either. From the start they established a kind of telepathic hypnotic control over our leaders. Over our leaders and over almost all of us, because it was as if we were under a spell that was leading us to our doom, as if we were being programmed by a type of ritual black magic that we did not realize existed. Just as a few of the original tall blondes clandestinely left Rigel when the Great War was about to break out, so did a few of the original tall blondes clandestinely leave Procyon and escaped into the corridors of time just before the Greys completed the slow undermining that culminated in their sudden takeover of Procyon. Those who stayed behind came under the total domination of the Greys. The blondes you see on the same ships as the Greys, working with them, are hybrids, or they are clones. One way to distinguish the clones is that they look alike. The real blondes have distinct facial feature differences, and do not look alike. The clones have thick necks and coarsely muscular bodies. They do not have the ability to teleport or to travel interdimensionally. They can be contacted by telepathy, but are unable to send. They can be given orders telepathically. They are zombie-like flesh robots. You can tell that they are of low intelligence by looking into their eyes. The real blondes are also muscular, but of slender necks and agile bodies. Their eyes are alert and of high intelligence. Physically they are almost identical to humans, the main difference being that by human standards their blood circulatory system is underdeveloped, while their lymphatic system is overdeveloped. This gives them stronger immune systems than terrestrial humans. The hybrids are in an intermediate state between the real blondes and the clones. After what has happened to Procyon, no true blonde would collaborate voluntarily with the Greys. The Greys have taken some prisoners of war, who have no choice in the matter, and are forced to work with them in order to survive, with the hope of escaping. There are also a few blondes who have become degenerate renegades, space pirates and mercenaries who sell their services to the highest bidder. But many of us remain free, and continue the fight to the finish with a life form that has become our hereditary enemy. We choose to remain in exile in the corridors of time, where they cannot reach us, rather than to live under the domination of the insidious Greys. It is dangerous for us to venture forth from the corridors of time, but occasionally we do so for a hit-and-run strike, similar in nature to a cosmic version of terrestrial guerrilla warfare. We must periodically enter a substantial physical form for a period of repose, or to breed progeny, in order to continue to survive, but otherwise we constantly travel the vast corridors of time. That is why we may appear to fade in and out like holographic images to human perception. What I have come here to communicate, if only to one or two people or a small group, is that what is now in the process of happening to your culture, also happened to ours. It is the same fate our own culture suffered. And the blondes you see with the Greys are either hybrids, clones, or prisoners of war. Because no true blonde who got out untouched, unscathed, uncrossed with those Greys would ever be with them. He or she would prefer to be in a state of non-existence. Besides the blondes and the Greys, ships from many other space cultures are watching planet Earth at this time with extreme interest. Scientists from other space cultures are studying what is going on here during this decisive period of your history. If your elected representatives had not so stupidly made a deal with the only aliens willing to provide them with weapons systems, with the short-sighted goal of overpowering the Russians, the Greys would not have achieved their present dominance, and you would now be exchanging ambassadors with a wide variety of space cultures. What I want to get across to you is that the ultimate evil, which underlies all the negativity in the cosmos, finds expression in that masked form of psychological complacency which leads an individual to adhere to a group philosophy rather than to think things through for oneself. Those who feel safe and comfortable in no matter what belief system merely because many others adhere to it, who get together and form an arrogant self-righteous group convinced it has a monopoly on the truth, and those who are ready to persecute, kill or stifle anyone who challenges that group's philosophy, have formed an alliance with the ultimate evil, whether they know it or not. It is the self-righteousness and implacability of certain elite power groups like the CIA and the KGB, certain organized religions, and certain so-called lunatic fringe groups such as some of the more fanatical star people, which are so objectionable. I have seen civilizations rise and fall, begin again only to die again, over and over and over. It isn't only a problem of this planet. It's a problem that must be faced by all civilizations in the course of their development, no matter where they may be located in the cosmos. Everyone wants a slightly larger piece of the pie than their neighbor for themselves, and eventually this tendency always culminates in choking them. Sooner or later this will be the undoing of the Greys as well, thereby enabling us to return in triumph from our exile in the corridors of time. The Greys do not see and are incapable of understanding their own fundamental error, that the very weakness they seize upon in humanity is their own inherent weakness, the blind spot that inevitably seals their doom. The only way to victory is through the strength of your consciousness. When genetic or other manipulations are being performed on abductees, the Greys expect them to cringe in fear, and derive a second-hand high from the intensity of the emotions expressed. If instead of cringing in fear, an abductee can put his or her mind elsewhere, focusing attention on dynamic protective imagery of a religious or mystical nature, it decreases the gratification that the Greys are getting from their second-hand high, and it confuses them. Center the consciousness on something so different from what they expect that it puzzles them. Note, in most cases the image of an empty red or crimson cross seems to be especially debilitating to the Greys. For instance, the legendary soldier saint, St. George, reputedly wore a shield with a red cross emblazoned on a white background. Whether one believes that the Dragon Slayers existed or not, the legend itself claims that the Christian Dragon Slayers of Europe more or less marked the end of the dragon race's infestation of the Old World. One such legend concerned the city of Cyllene, Libya, which had been plagued by a draconian beast for a long period of time. The king of the city had offered up sheep and livestock in an effort to appease the beast. However, the time came when all the livestock had been used up, and this was when human sacrifices were chosen, by lot, to appease the fearsome beast. One day the lot fell on the king's own daughter, and the grieved king, honoring his word, allowed her to be taken and tied to the post outside of the city gates. As the beast was about to pounce upon the princess, so the story goes, St. George appeared in shining silver armor and, before the beast knew what was happening, the soldier saint had pierced it through with his lance and rescued the princess, who later became his wife. Whether or not such legends have any basis in reality, the story nevertheless symbolizes the unconscious animosity between saints and serpents. If we are to believe the legends, then this was only one of the many vermin, as they were referred to in those ancient times, which St. George had vanquished during his life, and although not the only dragon slayer of legend, he was perhaps the most renowned. Branton. The only reason the Greys have such a degree of dominance over you is because your elected officials stupidly made clandestine agreements with them, binding you to them in an exclusive alliance that is respected by other space races, allowing them to install themselves in underground bases impregnable to your weaponry, a situation you must now find a way to extricate yourselves from. Note, in that the Greys have repeatedly violated these treaties, they should legally be considered null and void. In fact, since the executive branch of the United States government was taken over by a fascist CIA coup d'etat in 1963 at the time of the John F. Kennedy assassination, as were the governments of several other countries throughout the world where CIA-backed military coups resulted in the establishment of fascist puppet dictatorships, should we not consider the executive branch of government which made the treaties with the Greys to be null and void as well? It certainly was not Congress who authorized such treaties. Branton. In antiquity this planet was divided into sectors between 4 different groups: small bullet blondes, small bullet greys, small bullet large lizard-like beings now connected with the Capella system, small bullet beings now connected with the Arcturus system. These groups still consider themselves to be the owners of this planet. They do not recognize the human claim to ownership. However, some of us do recognize human rights, as well as the rights of other life forms. The Greys are having problems not only within their own ranks, but also on other planets they have colonized. As a species they are afflicted with severe, perhaps terminal, health problems, a weakness that can and should be exploited. Branton. They have substantial captive populations of blonde, human and other prisoners of war, eager to join a revolt at the slightest opportunity. One must be rational in attempting to fight back, and understand the proper way to proceed. Your own consciousness is the most potent weapon that is available to you at the present time. The most effective way to fight the Greys is to change the level of your consciousness from linear thinking to multidimensional awareness. Your secret weapon, your ace in the hole, is that you are not hive-minded collective thinkers, though many of you do fall into that category by conforming to conventional group patterns, and are therefore easily controlled by the Greys. It is your individuality which is your best weapon, because it is the one weapon you have that the Greys do not have. The major weakness of the Greys, their area of vulnerability, their Achilles heel, is their inability to think as individuals. They are an extremely telepathic high-tech society, but as individuals they are not creative thinkers. They take orders well, but they do not conceptualize well. They have the technology to throw your planet out of orbit, but there is one key ability that you have and they do not have. The ability to hold in mind imagery that inspires an individual to realize his or her direct personal connection to the source of all that is, which is the ineffable Godhead, no matter what name you may call it. That is your key to victory. And finally, a message from the Hybrid Council, the real inspiration behind this volume. It would be a grave error to give myself full credit for this volume, as I can state for absolute fact that most of the work on this volume was carried out by others who, operating through my unconscious mind, inspired me intuitively with the information, and led me to the sources and documentation, which were necessary for the completion of this book, which I consider a major challenge especially in spite of my own personal shortcomings. This backup team, you might say, consists of a number of so-called hybrids or hybrids who have broken free from the Draconian collective and established their own resistance movement based mainly within the underground systems of this planet, at least in the case of those family members or relatives of mine beyond this world who have inspired me with this work. Although they dwell within the cavernous recesses of this planet, they nevertheless interact with other worlds within the Federation who oppose the activities of the Draconian Orion Reticulum collectivists. They are constantly working to establish freedom and truth here on and under planet Earth. Since the hybrids/hybrids communicate with me on the intuitive level rather than through audible or visual communication, I will attempt to translate their often strong impressions into words and convey what I believe they would have the readers to know and understand about themselves and their feelings towards us. So here then is what I strongly feel and believe that these wonderful people would say to us. Greetings, friends, or should we say brothers and sisters? For indeed we are your brothers, your sisters, and your children. Many of those who have had encounters with the Greys will understand exactly what we mean. We are the children of your seed, and although our DNA has been altered we nevertheless possess souls, and this makes us just as human as you. Unlike our erstwhile masters who are lacking what you call soul, many of us hybrids, realizing our foundational humanity, began to develop emotional individuality. There are apparently several reasons why the Greys began the hybrid projects. Some projects were to breed stronger beings to serve their collective empire, others to breed Greys with human characteristics and specialized psionic abilities who could be used to understand humans on their own level and who could in turn teach the Greys how to more easily manipulate humans on various levels. The Grey collective apparently did not take into account that there would be, by the grace of God, so much resistance among our kind to their plans. You see, they could not fully understand the concept of individuality, compassion and loyalty to one's one kind. We speak of the collective here and not of the individual Greys. For when it comes down to it, there are no individuals among the reptilian collective. All serve as individual cells within a vast organism, the collective intellect or hive, you might say. But those of us who have developed free agency and have broken free from the hive have developed human individuality. It is a long and difficult process to wean ourselves entirely from the collectivist mindset that many of us were born into. We maintain a limited degree of collectivity, however have established what you might refer to as a firewall between our society and that of the Draconian hive itself. This is largely for the sake of other hybrids who are joining us from time to time, and is necessary for the process of deprogramming them from a mentality of collectivism and the continual development of their individuality. We cannot say that it is the individual Greys and reptiloids who are the source of the evils which are committed against humans throughout the universe by the Draconian collective. For as we have stated, there are no individuals within the collective itself, save for the malevolent beings who are its ultimate masters. Those supernatural beings who control the Draconian collective are the sources of the evils. The Greys and reptiloids are merely the tools. This is true in most cases except in the context that many of the rebel beings who you call fallen angels have been incarnating through the soulless reptilian races since very ancient times. Although we must see things as they really are, we realize that many of these supernatural beings have corrupted themselves to the point where there is no more hope for them to return to the good side, having annihilated any and all goodness within them. However, we would like to believe and hope that some of these rebel beings regret their present state and the part they played in the ancient rebellions against the Almighty One. We would like to believe that one of the underlying motives for the reptiloids/Greys and their breeding a race like ours would be for the purpose of raising up a race genetically akin to their own kind, yet not their own kind, who could understand where both the human and reptilian species are coming from. Could it be that a faint spark of individuality and concern within the legions who compose the collective somehow influenced the hybrid projects? Could it be that somewhere deep within the collective there existed and exists a desire to break free into individual consciousness, and in so doing break free from those supernatural tyrants who control the collective with a supernatural iron fist? Could it be that these intelligences within the collective saw that the logical thing to do would be for the Greys and their collective to work in harmony with the universe rather than against it? For the sake of their own survival? After all, they are logical beings, and many of the directives that have come down from the central command of the collective have contradicted logic and contributed to a kind of pervasive confusion and even self-contradicting schizophrenia, if not insanity within the collective. being that these intelligences did not have the power to develop individual consciousness of their own initiative in the face of the overwhelming tide of the collective and its twisted leaders. They understood that if they did succeed in breeding offspring that possessed natural individuality and emotionalism, then these offspring might in turn break free from the collective, and once having broken free, help others of their kind who do not possess the self-motivation to do so. Once these were tamed and deprogrammed and placed in an environment where free agency could develop, these aliens could then be given a choice to decide which side they will serve, whether they will remain with us or return to the collective and lose their individuality in the process. Knowing full well the dangers of a collective system where no individual expression is allowed, we have come to develop a deep and abiding respect for the sacredness of free agency, even to the point of allowing other beings to choose to destroy themselves if they are fully intent on doing so. We have also come to deeply respect the non-interference directives of our dear friends of the Federation worlds. Ours is a continual struggle, and we are not too proud to say that our ultimate victory or defeat depends largely on you. Every time you give in to the will of the Draconian Collective, every time you believe one of the lies of a Grey that is under the control of the Hive, every time you trade a little piece of your soul for the supposed benefits that the Collective will tell you are yours if you serve them, every time you do this you weaken yourselves and capitulate your power to the enemy. In so doing, you make our struggle all the more desperate. On the other hand, every time you challenge the claims of the Collective and expose their lies and refuse to allow them to manipulate you into their agendas, then you strengthen us in the process. Remember that we are truly your children, because the majority of us within the Resistance are more human than beast, reptilian, insectilian or what have you. Those genetic hybrids who do not possess a soul are rare among us because they find it very difficult to comprehend those individual virtues which come naturally or should come naturally to those possessing a human soul chakra matrix and a conscience. Above and beyond anything else, we would ask that you pray to our ultimate Creator, as best you understand the concept of God. Ask the all-knowing and all-loving One to be merciful. Plead for us, your brothers and sisters and children who live within, parallel to, and out among the stars, beyond this planet Earth. Please pray for us and also for the many others of our kind and your kind who are presently the captives of the soulless entities serving the collective. Since physical and intellectual defenses are not sufficient, being that we are also battling supernatural evils, we need the divine intervention of God and His holy, standing angels. Since the Draconian Collective attacks you and also us on the physical, psychic and spiritual levels, we cannot neglect the spiritual aspects of this conflict. With this, we of the Hybrid Council wish you all the best. May we, all of us, do all that we can to bring about a future that will be everything we had hoped for, and more. To our parents out there, you know who you are. Those of us who have separated ourselves from the controllers and also those who still remain in their grasp. We send you our love and our hugs. We remember and cherish every hug and warm touch that you have given us during those times in the night when you have been brought to us. Those times, whether you remember them consciously or not, when you have shared with us your feelings, your love, and in some cases your fears, and have shown us what being human is really all about. We want to say, we love you. Pray for us as we pray for you. Until that time when we can all meet together as one, in true freedom and peace, may the Almighty Source of all life protect and bless you all.
Hi there. This is Dulce. I want to thank you for listening through the whole Dulce book. As a token of my appreciation, I present to you this bonus feature, a lecture with Andromedan/Zenitian contactee Alex Collier, from 2002. Enjoy!
Alex Collier at Global Sciences, the 18th of March 2002. Hi. Before I get started, I want to give a quick blessing. Great Spirit, Isness, I give thanks for everyone that is here. We ask that they reach their homes and families in safety and that they all experience your incredible abundance and joy. Aho. It has been a while since I last talked, and I want to say that it is a real pleasure to be here at Global Sciences again. Is there anyone here not paying attention to world events? As you know, it is getting pretty weird. As they say in South Denver, the shit is hitting the fan. It is even going to get more interesting. There are all kinds of information available on the internet. There are all kinds of rumors circulating on the internet. Of course, the news is helping to propagate rumors as well as propagate lies and disinformation. It is even going to get worse. There is a lot at stake here. What I find so fascinating is that so many people that I run into have all the little bits and pieces of the puzzle, but everyone is having a very difficult time putting the pieces together. The reason being is that because this group is saying this, that group this, and that one saying that, etc. The only thing that I can tell you is that it is really time to invest in yourselves and listen to your own intuition. Many of you in this room have listened to your own intuition, which is why you have come to the global science and some of the other talks. If you continue to get information from outside on your own, you are going to get real lost very quickly because none of this is going to make sense, and that is because none of this does make sense. It is absolutely crazy at its best. This is being done specifically so that we run in circles not knowing what the hell is going on. So, I have 1 hour and 15 minutes and 15 minutes for questions. I want to talk about some things, so I am going to go pretty quick. We are going to start with first is Nibiru, the object that is entering our solar system. What is it? Is it really there? Are there legions on it, etc., etc.? Well, yes. It is coming. Is it the actual planet Nibiru? No, it is not. It is intelligently guided. I also want you to look at the idea that 6 or 7 years ago, the US had said that on August 12, 2003, that all the regressive ETs were going to be removed from the planet. That is actually going to happen, folks, because there is no way that we are going to be able to get a handle on our governments, our own planet, our own society, and stop being manipulated unless in fact they are removed. I know that there are different speakers that just focus on the light part of them. I think that is just great because it is important to focus on the light. But, it is also important to know that we do in fact live in a duality. The entire universe, which is all the galaxies and most of the dimensions, are in a duality. For some reason, that is the way it was set up. We all have choices. We all have free will. Every decision we make moves us on a path or down another path or around a corner, or we go back to go and don't collect our $200. So, where we find ourselves today, or what I should say is where I find myself, as a lot of folks are saying, is, why don't they just intervene and fix it? Why don't the ETs just come down and fix it? I confess, I had a lot of things like that myself. Why don't they just come and fix it? It would be easier for all of us if somebody would just fix it. Now they are going to fix the regressive ETs. They are going to, because that is a piece that we can absolutely not deal with. We are in way over our heads. They have technology way beyond our comprehension. Even the stuff our secret government doesn't tell us about. So, we can't deal with that. But, I am going to address this issue first. What happens after August 12, 2003, if everything goes along as scheduled, if what I have been told is correct, if the regressive ETs are in fact removed from this planet, then what happens next? The aliens are out of here. The aliens have been in control of the royal families, the governments, and the banking systems, those that have had ultimate control of the planet and our minds. Then what? What are we going to do about our current governments? What are we going to do about our corrupt banking system? What are we going to do about our corrupt corporations that absolutely pollute the planet and hide reversed engineered free energy? What are we going to do about that? Are we going to take responsibility? What are we going to do about the CIA trafficking drugs to our children in our schools and in our country? We all know what is going on. It has been going on since the 70s, maybe even earlier. So, what have we been done about it? We've done, butkus, nothing about it. Why, the ETs? The benevolents are taking so long to intervene. Because we talk the talk, but very few of us are actually walking the talk, and the ETs know. They know us better than we know ourselves just by watching our habits, by watching the way we respond to world events, social events, and community events, basically apathy. It is everywhere, except in the Mideast. But it is to the extreme in the Mideast. That is why this isn't going to be easy. There are certain things that we the people have to take responsibility for. One of the items is our government. Am I anti-government? I am not. I am anti-corrupt government, I absolutely am. Do I think George Bush is a good guy? I think really deep down he has a good heart. But, is he in control? No. Neither was Bill, his dad, and John Kennedy. We haven't had a real president since Eisenhower. He warned us when he left office. Is anyone familiar with the Disclosure Project? www.disclosureproject.org. Read that and educate yourselves real quick about that. I won't go into that because that is somebody else's thunder. You should absolutely research that. It is literally the smoking gun that most of us that have been investigating enough or research have been looking for, the smoking gun. We have ex-government, ex-military, ex-intelligence, are telling the truth about ETs. Our government has been suppressing this information for over 50 years. What a shock and surprise, right? The fact that they have reversed engineered technology, free energy, and the fact that we haven't needed fossil fuel for over 40 years. What a shock! What a surprise! Here we are about ready to start World War III over oil. Here we are bombing the hell out of Afghanistan so we can make sure we set up a pipeline for oil when in fact we don't need it. Oil is not the real agenda. The real agenda is the extermination of specific races on this planet. This originally was an Orion concept. It came from star systems in the Orion group. These are things they did when they moved into different solar systems and star constellations. They would run across a race that was specifically psychic or specifically gifted in some way that is somewhat of a threat to them. This was also something they did when they moved into a star system and the genetic lineage was stronger than their own and they had a great deal of difficulty controlling with them. Essentially they would pick the weaker of the races, the ones that they knew they could control and exterminate the rest. This model was demonstrated twice on the planet Earth. First was the biblical flood of Noah, and the second time on a much smaller scale was the Inquisition in Europe propagated by the Roman Catholic Church, which specifically targeted women. We are going to talk about that because much of the situation that we on Earth find ourselves in, other races have been in the same position. I am going to pick up on one specific race tonight, the Persians. It is imperative that you understand soon. The world is going to be cast into turmoil. That is by design. It is going to get us looking in a different direction. It is going to be economic. It is going to be terrorism. There are going to be nuclear detonations. According to Morani, the ETs are going to allow 2 here in the United States. I want you to think about that. 2 will go off in the United States. New York is still a target. New York City and Manhattan. I have a big problem with this, a very big problem. It was brought to my attention that the United States was the first to use them on innocent people and that there was to be some type of balancing so that we will in fact learn our lesson. I have a problem with that as well. But, nonetheless, whether I have a problem with it or not, I'm just telling you. That is coming. I absolutely don't want this to come. But it is always prudent to always prepare for the worst and always hope for the best. So what does that mean? That means we have to be very vigilant about being self-sufficient, about preparing ourselves, about being close to family, about old issues, about petty differences. It means basically start to form community, reaching out to friends, neighbors, and family. It is time to really to invest in ourselves, because our government is not going to help. The truth is, it is not our government. It was bought and paid for years ago. The reason I say this is because our solar system is loaded with spacecraft. A lot of you may see them at night moving through the sky. The fleets are moving through the sky in formation. Here in Colorado, we are blessed to have such a clear sky. The craft are all over the place. In fact, I was told about something that was following the moon around. A bunch of people saw it. It wasn't the Soyuz. It wasn't a satellite. They are here. They are buzzing our space shuttles. They are buzzing our airports. They are buzzing our military. They are buzzing everybody. You've got a disclosure project. You've got intelligence people who have reputations on the line telling you of this. Telling you, we saw this. Telling you, we saw bodies. Telling you, we reversed engineered technology, and private corporations have control of it. It is imperative that you get this if you are looking for credibility with you on this subject. There appears to be a movement that is trying to disseminate information. Trying to get everyone caught up. The truth is, I don't think everybody is going to be brought up to speed. Our goal is 10%. Not 50%, not 60%, not 100%. It is 10%. We have to shoot for 10% of the consciousness of the planet to shift the other 90%. If we try to save everyone, we are just spinning our wheels. A lot of folks just don't care. Move out of the way. Start talking to those that do care. The ET piece is just a part of it. The sun is shifting. It is changing its frequency. The planets are changing. Their magnetic fields are changing frequency. Everything is changing. We are seeing a polarity of people throughout the world begin. The Mideast is just the beginning. I want you to know this is all just a manipulation. It is all a manipulation. It is literally the last stand for the regressive ETs that have had control of the planet for 1500 years. It is their last hurrah. I am specifically talking about some reptilian races. There are some human races from Alderaan, which is in the Pleiades. They are not nice guys. I'm sick and tired of hearing, oh, the wonderful Pleiadians. There are 7 star systems there. One of them has a group that is just not worth a DN. The Alderaans were also the ones that helped the Nazis giving them technology, the Aryan race. We don't need to into that, you can figure out the rest. Volcanoes are going off everywhere because the planet is beginning to change. I know that there is a lot of good information out there about the frequency of the planet. It is our consciousness, folks. There is a huge shift. A huge shift, and I am not saying that this not of the photon belt, I am not saying that. This shift is coming from the sun in our galaxy and the universe. It is happening here, it is happening everywhere. Now these are positive things. These are extremely positive things. This shift in energy is an extremely positive thing, because it is movement, and that is what we need is movement. So many of us have been stuck trying to figure out what to do. How can we fix this? The minute we come up with an idea, something else happens. Now we are trying to fix that. We were just going around in circles. What we are dealing with here are 2 concepts of power. One is power over and the other is mutual power. Power over is controlling the world through fear, manipulation, intimidation, money, presidents, tyranny, homelessness, etc. This is all power over. Power over is a model of societal engineering from the star systems of Orion and Alpha Draconis. It is a polarity. It basically says that there is a hierarchy. There is an elite and everybody else works for them. Everybody is a natural resource like oil, food, minerals, etc. That is what we look at as natural resources. Well, they look at us as a natural resource. They look at us in the same way. Do you grasp this? Does this take you out of the box to know that someone looks at you as if you were a cow, a resource? It is really interesting that this model kicked in right after World War II, which incidentally was taught to the Germans by the Alderaans from the Pleiades. That is their model because they know that it works. That is how they control their people, or other star systems, is with this model. Money is the perfect instrument for that. I know that I have said this before in many of my lectures, about my contacts with Miranian Visais, the Andromedans. You can get all this information from the website, www.lettersfromandromeda.com, all one word. There is also a book, Defending Sacred Ground, you can download. You just have to buy the paper. Look at it, read it at your leisure. You'll pretty much find everything there with the exception of the updates. We'll be updating it soon, I promise. That was the power over model. The mutual power model is one that actually geared toward nourishing the soul. Developing the person from the inside/out. Not feeding the head with facts and figures that really don't help anybody grow up, that only turn us into robots and computers so we can only spit out facts. It doesn't actually help us change the world, change reality, change what we are. It doesn't nurture us, feed our souls into becoming more and more a part of physicality. All it does is create more conflict. I realize that I'm putting the ETs into 2 camps. Since I only have an hour and 15 minutes, it is easier to draw that line. Everything they do is to promote growth with the person, the being. Children are taught everything. Nothing is held back from the children. They are the ones that move on. They are the ones that inherit and then teach their children the standards that were taught them. Is it a wonder that we look at the world today and it is literally going to hell? Most parents are working, and who is raising the children? The public school system is. If you are watching it, the United States has gone from number 2 to number 25 in the industrial nations in the education of our children in just 40 years. Do you know how much you paid for that? $40 billion is what was paid to go from number 2 to number 25. Number 26 is not being the best, just in case you didn't know how the scale ran. Many people know this but aren't doing anything about it. Again, this is another issue of responsibility. Like I said, when you read this material, they are going to remove the ETs. Not just these, but a coalition that is just sitting out there. They are going to remove them. Then they are just going to sit up there. We are going to see them and they are going to just watch what we do. They want to see how we are going to handle each other. They are going to see if there is going to be any real shifts. They are going to remove the ETs. They are not going to remove the royal families. They are not going to remove our corrupt government. They are not going to remove our corrupt global corporations. No, they aren't going to do that. Why? Because that is our responsibility. We created those monsters. We allowed them to get out of control, out of hand. We mismanaged our planet. It is easy to say, hey, I'm just a carpenter, I'm just a car salesman, what the hell do I know? Do you vote? 90% in this room don't. I know for a fact. Do you ever go to town meetings? Do you ever run for city council? I bet 90% of you would say no, even 95%. Do you ever go to school functions? Do you support the local schools? Do you go to the teachers' meetings to find out what they are talking about and how they are going to teach our children? We don't. This is what I am talking about. I do, but I am just one person and I can't do this alone. My wife thinks I am absolutely out of my mind for coming out and talking again. She's probably right. Wives are mostly right anyway. Coming to global science is great. Gathering information is great. Dwelling on it, meditating on it, rambling it around, trying to come up with solutions, is great. But what are you going to do about putting it into practice? That is the real work here. I have all kinds of people that contact me. They know everything. I talked to one guy that memorized the Encyclopedia Britannica. I was impressed until I spent the afternoon with him and realized that he didn't have an ounce of common sense, but he could remember what was on page 223 of the Encyclopedia Britannica. What good is the information if you don't use it, or apply it? It is frustrating for me that I can stand up here and give you all of this information and half of what is in my bag there. But, what would you do with it? It is information. Will you use it? What would you do with it? Will you apply it? Most of you won't. So, what is the point in giving it to you? Do you understand? I am expressing a real frustration that not only I have, but other speakers as well. It is time. What are you holding yourselves back for? You are awesome. Every single one of you is awesome. Do you all believe that there is a creator? Are there any atheists in this room? I mean down, cold-hard atheists? Don't be afraid, raise your hands. My next question is, if there is a creator and you believe that there is a part of you, a spark, even if it is only an infinitesimal speck of her in you, then what are you holding yourselves back for? This is it. We have Edgar Case's prophecies coming to life. We have other contactees information. There are other prophecies being fulfilled. The Book of Revelations is being fulfilled. We have all these other psychics, other writers, other gifted seers from the Middle Ages. What they saw is now beginning to gel. We are all beginning to see it. We're fulfilling the prophecies. Are you just going to sit there and wait? Suppose Jesus misses the planet and goes to another planet. Suppose he is late. Suppose he stops off for a cup of coffee and says, I got time, and then he doesn't get here in time. What if he doesn't show up at all? Then what? I don't want to be the only one up here talking. I don't want to have to do this anymore. I've done this for 13 years and I'm tired. I have a young family to raise. I'm in over my head. I have 2 sons, Brutus and Cassius. We're not parents, just referees. Parenting, I hope, comes real soon. They are good boys. Ladies and gentlemen, here is the deal. The bottom line is that we do not have control of our society. We do not have control of our governments. We have been literally disempowered across the globe. As a people, we think that as long as we got money in the bank and that we have gas in our cars that we are doing okay. That is an illusion. That's an absolute illusion. That could go away at any time. Talk to some of the older folks that have gone through the Great Depression. That could all go away, and it probably will. So what is the most important thing? That is each other and community. That means that we have to slip outside our boxes and reach out to each other. That is not always a nice thing. The Procyon are approximately 600 years more advanced than we are technologically. In that 600 years I include what the government, the secret government for a lack of better words, multinational corporations, the secret technology, reversed engineered technology that has been hidden from us. Here is a race that is 600 years more advanced than us. They were subverted the exact same way we are being subverted. TV, radio, the media, government, belief systems that absolutely were not real. They changed definitions and meanings of words that it meant one thing when I was a kid to something else that is completely opposite to my children. This causes more conflict and confusion. They did everything they could to make sure that the people who were righteous and moral were considered square and old-fashioned. To be decadent was then in fashion. I could go on, but you are intelligent and know what I mean. It took approximately 100 years to literally change enough generations that they couldn't remember what their ancestors stood for. Does any of this sound familiar? The New Jersey 5th grade textbooks talks about the forming of the United States. They have taken out all references to George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, not even mentioned. It is interesting that you can even go to that subject information and not mention those two. But, they managed to do it. The Procyon were suppressed. All thought was monitored with the use of technology, what we would know as satellites today. They implanted and branded every person on their planet they could find with a mark. The censorship of thought is literally what occurred. The entire civilization of that star system began to die. Its spirit was slowly being suppressed because their age limit was about 100 years of age, about 30 to 35 years more than the average here. The ET races that were there lived an average of 2,000 years of age. It was nothing to do a short tour of duty managing this solar system and this particular people, this race. They did this, controlling the planet. They took away all space travel because of its lack of natural resources. At that time they were using fuel, not petroleum, but something else that was flammable in the spacecraft. The planet ran out of most of their natural resources. So now, nobody had any way to get off their planet. They were then managed from moons in Procyon star system. Are you following me? Now, they have control of the high ground, so to speak. The Orion group is made up of 18 different star systems. The Orions are managing this particular star system. What happened was that a group of women got together and formed a women's circle. This planet is called Arvika without the negative connotation. In the women's circle, they got together, they talked, they prayed, and they meditated. They found out that whenever they got together in this circle they could make things happen. They could make things manifest. They could create opportunity. They would slowly bring in more women. They would start raising their daughters that way. They learned to hide the children from the system and raise them in this idea that they could in fact create and manipulate physicality with their minds, and it spread. It took approximately 134 years. That is how long it took to undo what had been done to them, 2 whole generations. Here on Earth it would be 3 or 4 generations. What they did was to start to teach some of the old ways. Many of the women became mediums. They began to tap into other consciousnesses that were sending information that had been there all along, but nobody was listening because they were too busy. Too busy buying more toys, more cars, more DVDs, etc. I am using that as an example. I don't know what they really had. But they were so focused on some external stimulus that they forgot about the inside. That was their downfall. They did not balance the two. We are exactly in that same place. We are not balancing the inside and the outside. We are not balanced on the inside and the outside, not at all. I'm not always either. The Procyons grew. The women formed circles all over their worlds. Their participating star systems connected with others through the use of these mediums, never doubting the information they were getting. I can't tell you any more about that because I don't know. Literally what happened was that they created the 10% shift in consciousness. The men, who were the most oppressed, the most controlled, the most beaten down, the most emotionally shut down because they had to be constantly in the warrior space to survive and take care of their families. The men lost their compassion, their sensitivity, and their intuitiveness. The men were virtually useless. It was very easy to push their buttons. When that happened, you automatically get a response, a violent response. This is opposed to taking a step back and saying, "Whoa, I am being manipulated. What am I doing?" That wasn't happening. It was the women whom had the nerve, the guts, the strength, and the courage to step out of the bullshit and take a look and said that we need to something anyway. In the 134 years what happened was that they began to rebel. They became more intuitive. Men became more compassionate about their families. What happened was that they found soul. The entire star system of Procyon became one group soul again. Everybody was automatically on the same page. It wasn't about Joe, the next door neighbor. It wasn't about Louie across the street. It was about everybody getting the yoke of tyranny off their necks. It all came together in everything they did with the one goal in mind. To this day, the leaders of those worlds are women. The men have their role. They are still men. They have not been stripped of their manhood or anything like that. The truth is that the women make the most logic. They make the most common sense. They are the ones that have the babies. They know, guys. We'll never know that part. How precious life is and was. Will that work on Earth? I don't know. The Procyon at that point, once they started to rebel, their consciousness was projected out into space. The handlers were absolutely not prepared for that much of a unification of energy. They absolutely were not prepared for it. They were only trained to take it apart, and it wasn't working anymore. The Orion group was only trained to take it apart. Once it was apart, man had changed. The truth is, once the people decided that is enough, they pulled their energies together. They became one huge community within the star system. The Orions were absolutely not prepared for it. What happened then was that the Procyons called for help. The Pleiadians from Taygeta and a group of Moth people from Alpha Centauri showed up and helped them. I want you to know that there are at least 3 motherships in our solar system that are from Procyon. They volunteered. They know all about this group. They have been doing this for thousands and thousands of years. We are not the only star system that they have tweaked. Taking all that into consideration, the first goal is the issue. The issue is that we are not a community here. We have been taken apart. Does that mean that we have to see eye to eye on everything? No, not because we won't. But there is a thing about mutual respect. There is the idea that this is a small planet. It is our home. We only have so much water. We only have so much natural resources. Who controls it? Does it benefit everyone? You already know the answer to that. It is all about control, and you have no say-so about any of this whatsoever. There is an old song by Bob Dylan. I don't remember the name of it, but I do remember this line. In order to be honest, you have to step outside the law. That is kind of what it feels like. It still amazes me that people think that we are the only ones in the galaxy. There can't possibly be other life out there. What is even more baffling to me is that they can look at the world the way it is going and think that we have this great future coming, this marvelous future coming. We are running out of air, water, the polar caps are melting. All the governments are corrupt. Politicians are corrupt, and they still think this is it. This is awesome. I can't believe they still have more babies. I remember in a contact, we were talking about education. Vaside was telling me about how they educate their children. On their world, as is with many other worlds, teachers are the rock stars. They are given the highest honors in their society. They are the ones that teach the future generations. I have had a lot of time to think about that now that I have son going into kindergarten, my oldest. We're having to deal firsthand with the school system. It is scary, real scary. They are the first to admit that it doesn't work, but they are going to do it anyway. It is like you know that the car won't start, but you get in and try it anyway. You just sit there and try to turn the wheel. Here, the teachers are starving and we worship the rock stars, or the guys that plays in a band, or the guy that can shoot basketballs through this little hoop. That's who we worship, and you know we have some serious problems. I don't expect people to go out and save the world. That is not what I am asking for. I'll tell you exactly what I am asking for. I am asking you to create the space to work on your inside, work on yourselves. That is the part of you that is going to be transitioning to another dimension. That is the part of you that leaves the physical body when your body dies. That is you, not this body shell. I want you to work on that and we'll get through this. You are awesome, just awesome. Reincarnation is a fact. I am not going to stand up here and try to prove it to you. You have to figure that out for yourselves. The soul goes on. It continues to educate itself. It experiences the extremes of emotion. It wasn't meant to sit in a chair and watch TV. That is not what it was built for. That is self-sabotage when you get addicted to outside stimulation. Sure, it is imperative to know what is going on around you. It is the manner in which you know it. Do you know it from what you see? What the conscious mind tells you? Or, do you know it from an intuitive place? That place is soul. Most auntie, and it is really time to invest in that part of you. There is no right way to do it. You don't have to do yoga. You don't have to meditate. You don't have to get those little bells that go cling, cling, cling. You don't need to do any of that stuff. Everybody is their own thing. Me, I like to go for a walk. I want to be in nature. I want to be in the world. I want to get as close to an elk as I can. That's my thing. Walk like an Indian. That is where I find time. I am a much better person when I come back. You all have to create your own ritual, no matter what it is. Even if it's sewing or knitting, whatever helps you to get into the zone. It is imperative that you do that. World events, I am going to jump back to that. It is imperative, folks, that you watch Prince Charles. He is about to make his move. I talked about this back in 1996, and everybody was saying, "Oh my God, Alex. Look what happened to Diana." I didn't know about Diana. I didn't know that was going to happen to her. What I have been told is that the Windsors are going to set themselves up in a position of power so that they can manage the United Nations. I'm waiting to see how that happens. You want to keep an eye on him and those biggers. The next thing I want to talk about is sharing wisdom. Ladies and gentlemen, there are a lot of smart people in here, a lot of knowledge. A lot of your friends who are attending these type of lectures are doing the same type of research as you. There is an awful lot of knowledge in this room. We have to figure out a mechanization way for sharing this knowledge. Global Science is one of them. It meets once a month. Its resources are stretched and we have to figure out other mechanizations, other ways to share knowledge on a weekly basis, on a bi-weekly basis, and on a daily basis. There is a lot of talk. A lot of people are conscious about the government. There are 3 million of them and 278 million of us. What are we afraid of? The fact is they are the ones afraid of us. That is why they are trying to suppress us. Sure, it would be easy for Alex not to be of sound mind, stay at home, and not do anything. I have strongly contemplated that. Those who know me, those in my circle know that to be a fact. This is my least fun part. But, I look at my children, I look at their friends, I look at my community, I look at children on the bus, and I can't help but going to that place. Am I really preaching what I teach? If I just sat at home and didn't do squat. If I just talked about it, threw a tantrum, threw Kleenex at the TV when something was said that I didn't like. Would I be working my talk? The answer is no. I want you to know that it was the hardest thing I ever had to do, the walking and the talking. It is not easy. It is a huge responsibility. I don't want to be alone in it. I know that talking to others, that they don't want to do it either. There are a lot of the same faces here. When was the last time I spoke at Global Science? A year. 2 years ago. There are still a lot of the same faces. I think that is great. But more needs to be done. I don't know exactly how to do that either. But, I do know that if we all sat down with a cup of coffee and got in a circle we would brainstorm and come up with some really good ideas. Ideas that are practical and logical. Ideas that we could actually do and put something into place that would not stretch our resources such as they are. So, I am open. I am game. If you tell me that you are going to have a meeting, I'll be there, I'll help. I will do whatever I can. I will contribute in any way I can. But, I don't want it to be about me. It is not about me, it is about us. The Mideast, they are going to create World War III, unless there is direct intervention. I hope that happens. Most of the Arab nations have been designated for extermination. So that would be nuclear. Most of it is going to be biological. The whole thing with Israel, and I know this is not good news to some of you. The whole thing is being manipulated from the royal families in Europe and the Saudi government. The Saudi government is also one of the old Roman Empire families. Let's not lose track of that. We are also going to have problems here in this country. It is imperative that you start taking care of your immune system. Start doing things about strengthening your immune system. There are a lot of ways to do that. Eat more live food. Eat lower on the food chain. If you don't like vegetables, learn to like them. The lower you eat on the food chain, the safer you will be. The higher it is, the more processed the food is. Read foreign newspapers. I mean that. If you own a computer, read foreign newspapers. Cancel your subscription to the Denver Post. You might as well use it on your arse, it is a waste of paper. Use the internet to read foreign newspapers. I mean that. If you want to know what is happening in this country, you have to go outside the country to find out. That is a fact. Colloidal silver, essential oils, herbal products, there are all sorts of things you can do to strengthen and build up your immune system. The healthier you are, the stronger you'll be and the more able you'll be to deal with the stresses that are coming when things do start to happen. Try to start drinking more bottled water or filtered water. It is imperative that you try to eliminate as much fluoride from your drinking water as possible. It has gotten so bad that the last number I heard was that 14% of high school freshmen were showing signs of Alzheimer's, and that is aluminum buildup on the brain. That, ladies and gentlemen, is coming from your drinking water. Your city tap water has fluoride in it. That is where it is coming from. The Germans introduced it back in the late 30s. They were using it in the concentration camps. That is what made the Jewish people so docile specifically in that, and that is how they did it. All furnished by I.G. Farben, the Rockefellers, all the safe players. Those of you that have children, do you know what they are being taught in school? That is a huge issue. Try to find out again in what is going on in your community, the city, state, and local governments. Get involved. Go to some of these meetings. I live in a small community here in the Front Range. I have applied for several positions where the people have left or resigned from city council positions. I have commented that I would like to have a seat on these boards. This Oct. I am going to run for city council. I don't know where I came up with this decision. We'll see what happens. Do your inner work. We talk about freedom here in the United States. I am always curious to find out what freedom means to people. Everybody has a different definition. We have a couple of different babysitters. One of them seemed real intelligent. So I asked her what she was doing in school. She said American history and the American Revolution. I said super, one of my favorite subjects. I asked her what she thought of freedom. She said that she thought it was great. I asked her to describe freedom to me. She said, I can get into the car and go to the mall. That was her answer. Then the air came out of my balloon. I hate to say this, but that is pretty common. People just really don't know. How many of you know? I am going to read you the Andromedan definition for those of you that have never heard it before. For those of you that have, you get to hear it again. This was given to me by Versailles. How this came about was that I asked him what our future was going to be like because I was very concerned and still am very concerned. This is what he told me: responsible freedom of self-determination, becoming truly self-confident and free, to unconditionally be responsible for oneself without being coerced to accept some higher authority. Ladies and gentlemen, the God of the Bible was an extraterrestrial. That is what it is all about. He is not the creator of the world, because he would not need a spaceship. The God who created the universe wouldn't have to nuke Sodom and Gomorrah. He wouldn't have the time. He wouldn't create all this then just pick one race and say, these are my chosen people. He couldn't be that stupid. So you know what I am saying? To create the entire universe, all the dimensions, all the star systems, all the galaxies, and just deal with one tiny little thing. Think about that. Many years ago, the US had mentioned pole shifting. To my knowledge, that is still coming. I don't know when. When this does happen, it is going to be a 17-degree pole shift. That is a fact. The poles will shift to the west. Which means that if it moves to the west, much of the Pacific Ocean is going to be in Grand Junction and the western slope of the Rockies, not to mention what is going to happen to the rest of the world. I want you to know that I have not been given any promises that I am going to be beamed up. I am not going to have a box seat on a starship. I am here just like you and I am concerned. I also want you to know that a good friend of mine who is in Europe said that special has been broadcast several times on the TV special by the National Geographic Channel about a group of doctors. A group of doctors in the United States that could not get their story told in this country. That story is the spread of tuberculosis in our inner cities. It is spreading like wildfire. The US said years ago that this was going to happen and most of the cities were going to be quarantined. Those of you that fly a lot might want to think about getting an Amtrak pass. Airplanes are nothing but a flying petri dish. So we have to really pay attention. We really have to pay attention. Those of you who know Joyce Riley and the Gulf War issues, there is a lot going on, but we are not being told anything about it. That is why it is imperative that you start getting your information and start tapping into news sources from outside the United States. The Europeans are telling it like it is. I spent 2 weeks in Paris this last Jan. And yes, I took a plane. The French cab drivers are assholes. They hate Americans, no matter who they are and how much they tip. It doesn't matter. Every night they talk about the United States. I couldn't begin to tell you I heard. I'm taking notes, writing things down. When I came I started researching it and it was true. There is not a word about in the United States. They are managing us very well. It sends chills up my spine knowing how well we are being managed. I just want to reiterate that. Planet X, August 12, 2003. Several months ago we posted an update regarding Nibiru. That specific group of Nibiruans were allowed induction into the Andromedan Council. The Andromedan Council is held in Andromeda. It is at last count made up from 173 star systems in our galaxy that are part of this. The Andromedans do not control it or manage it. They only hold the meetings there and serve refreshments. It is held in their system, their star system. The system of Zenitae in the constellation of Andromeda, not the galaxy of Andromeda. That is somebody else trying to muddy up those waters. A specific family of Nibiru has been given an induction into the council. That family is part of the lineage of Enki. Some of you have read Zacharias Sitchin. It is the Enki lineage. Jehovah or Enlil, they won't even give him the time of day. Because the truth is, the guy is a psychopath. There is mental illness in space too, not just here. He, Jehovah, Enlil, and many others are stuck in the paradigm of control over. It is like any other addiction. It is a tough habit to break, trying to manage and control others. They do that because they don't trust themselves or others. They don't trust the movement of life and love. They have to control and manipulate. Every day we are in relationships like that. Whether it is in our thoughts, our relationships, our boss's thoughts, and in some cases, husbands and wives. Our kids are taught that in order to get what they want. We were taught that model, our parents were taught that model. Somehow we have to come together and figure out how to break that cycle. I want to take some questions now. Q, can you share how I, or someone could contact the Andromedans or the Procyon? What is the proper way to do that? AC. That is an excellent question. I can't tell you about the Procyon. I don't know them on how you could contact them. I myself have never met them. But, there are symbols, the ETs use 4th and 5th density language. It is holographic and numerical. If you could take the Chinese and Japanese, for those of you that know it all, you can take the symbol from the page and make it a 3-dimensional or 4th-dimensional model and spin it. It would make a shape and create a frequency, a vibration. That is how they talk to each other. Within that symbol are entire concepts of everything they have been taught and experienced about a specific meaning or phrase. The expression of love, I can only give you an example of the Andromedan language because that I have been taught other than the languages here on Earth. When they express or project into your head a symbol of love, instantly, thousands of pictures or meanings of the expression of love are given. It is instantaneous, like the snap of a finger. It is like watching a movie zip by your eyes. It is thousands of scenes or even more. It could be millions for all I know, all for what that expression means. It is everything that their mind has stored up for what that expression means given to you all at once. That is how they do it. Nothing is held back. It is not like we're having a conversation and I have to convince you that I love you by doing all sorts of things like, doing things around the house, washing and waxing the car, or take you shopping. Like when people go on a first date. The guy goes out of his way to be extra nice and vice versa. It is not like that at all because they are telepathic rays. There are no secrets. There are no lies. You see everything at once. So, if I was an Andromedan man and I was trying to get it on with an Andromedan woman and I gave her a quick projection of love, hand her a gift, or maybe in the back of my mind I am thinking that maybe I would like to sleep with her. She would know right off the bottom line. She would know exactly where I was coming from. She would dust me off like an old fly. It is because of a lack of depth. That is not to say that because I don't have depth or that you don't have depth. But, compared to them, we don't have a lot of depth. We are only operating on a 14% to a generous 20% brain capacity. Whereas, they are operating on a 65% to 70% brain capacity. When they have a conversation it is not only historical, it has insight, philosophic, futuristic. It is everything all at once. That's why I love question and answer periods. I have so much data in my head I don't know how to tap into it. It is all wrapped up in those 14% crannies and corners. So the question was, the Andromedan, this is their symbol for their rays. When they are introduced at councils, or to other star systems, their dignitaries when they walk into a room, this symbol is projected at everyone so that everyone knows who they are. Somewhere written in this symbol is their history. Who they are and what they represent. For telepathic races, this is all they need. This is their business card, an email, your driver's license, your spaceship license, all this for a specific race. If I am an Andromedan and I project this symbol into your head you will automatically know who I am and where I come from. You will not only see the star system, you will know its history, its probable future, and its present time in an instant. I think it would be totally cool if we could all do that. You know why? Because all the BS would go away like a bad habit. Q, are you making a distinction when you speak about beings from Orion? Are you classifying them all with one group? AC. No. The Orion group is specifically 18 different groups within the Orion star system. Q, what do the Andromedans say about the crop circles? AC. They say it is fifth dimension geometry. It is a language specifically for the ETs that are already here on the planet or underneath the planet. Although, we are getting something out of it as well. Q, I have heard that 1 out of 40 has been transponded with a chip. Is that true? AC. Not to my knowledge. Q, what are some of the things that the people in Europe are telling you that you have checked out? AC. Most of the Europeans discuss American politics. That is a favorite subject of theirs. Especially how the United States has thrown its weight around for years. Even since the United States dollar has become the world's reserve currency. They talk about how many American corporations are very corrupt and very tyrannical by their nature. They talk about how our fiat money system, the Federal Reserve banking system, is going to collapse around the year 2003 or 2004. The Europeans were thrilled when they heard that they were going to form their own currency. Their own United States of Europe, and have a percentage of their own euro dollar backed up by gold so they can stick it up the Americans you know what. They can't wait to do it. It was also asked while I was on a train in Zurich, if all Americans were like those that are on the Jerry Springer show. Are you really like that? As I was laughing I said no. I don't know why they showed that crap on TV. You think that they would know better. But, that is how they view us. But, at the same time, America has done some great things. I also heard a story while in Paris about some kids that were arrested screaming, "Aren't you going to read me my rights?" The police replied that you have no rights. The kids yelled back that they did because they saw it on TV. The French police would say that is only in America. America still has a lot to offer the world. America is still in a position to teach. But, it requires management on our part of our government. If we abdicate management on our part to a group of international bankers, we are screwed. We are in a tough spot. This venture into Iraq is going to be very scary. The chickens are coming home to roost, they really are. This is not a good idea. I think we should give the Mossad $1 million and say, go get them. Let the Mossad do it. They know what they are doing. Cue the ET removal of August 12, 2003, will we witness this and recognize this? AC. Yes, you will absolutely witness it. You will see the ships leaving from all over the earth and from the oceans. You will see ETs, particularly those of a reptilian in nature, walking on the surface of the planet. They are going to be flushed out of the inside of the earth to the surface. You will also see starships coming into the upper atmosphere to capture them and take them out of here. It is going to be like the Brian Star Wars. I sincerely hope and believe that it is going to happen. We need a serious shift here. The ET intervention is specifically to take the ET piece out of here. The intervention is not to solve the problems that we as a society created. That is our responsibility. I want to make a very clear distinction about that. We are going to have to take responsibility for not taking responsibility. I believe in harnessing the power and energy we have here. How can we plug into some of this greatness that you spoke of this evening? There was a conference held in Arizona last week in which there were Chinese, Japanese, and some Russians, all scientists that came together without any money being given by their governments. Of course, the pharmaceutical companies were not happy about this conference. They were talking about alternative ways to cure cancer and other diseases. They were going to put forth a consortium of people to pool their knowledge, etc. How can we tap into that? AC. I'll address two issues there. Intervention has occurred several times already. As far as cancer is concerned, the best way to prevent and cure it is to deal with the acidity in your body. In other words, watch the pH levels of your body. Cancer is a disease that will not grow in a body that is alkaline. When the body is too acidic, that is when disease sets in. Acidity is food combining. It is eating too much red meat. Eating too much processed foods. It is not eating enough live foods. That is the secret. Watch the pH balance of your physical body. As far as reaching out to this greatness, you are great. Everyone here is great. We just have to create the space to come together and start walking our talk. We need to stop our petty nonsense. The Native Americans practiced getting into a circle whenever they would discuss decisions that would affect the entire tribe. They would project 7 generations. Every decision they would discuss how it would affect, as best they could, the next 7 generations. That is wisdom. That is very serious wisdom, because they would not do quick fixes that would come back to haunt them in 10 or 15 years later. In closing, I want to quote something that Versailles told me years and years ago. We are our own inheritance. Thank you all very much.